What if I told you, and really think about this for a second, that making $1 million a year might actually, realistically, make you poorer than someone making $40,000?
Right, which, I mean, that sounds like a complete mathematical impossibility at first glance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because what if the ultimate luxury isn't, a massive number in your bank account, but actually just a complete, unapologetic rejection of this traditional deferred life plan we've all been sold?
It's a huge shift in mindset
Yeah.
because we are trained, literally from childhood, to view wealth strictly as this absolute numerical value, just a high score.
Like a video game.
Yeah, exactly like a video game. But when you start to pull apart the actual mechanics of how we live and how we consume our own time, how we extract value from our labor, that premise completely dismantles the standard American definition of success.
Well, welcome to the deep dive. Today we are tearing down that traditional retirement myth. We're exploring Chapter 1, Cautions and Comparisons from our source material. And over the course of this conversation, you are going to learn how to distinguish between the, frankly, fundamentally flawed goal of a distant retirement and the immediate reality of what's called lifestyle design.
And this matters so profoundly for anyone listening who is interested in true entrepreneurial freedom, or honestly, just personal sanity at this point.
Right, because we are going to explore the currency of the new rich. And spoiler alert, it isn't cash, it's time and mobility. If you grasp the mechanics of this, it can fundamentally alter your trajectory today. So where do we even start with this?
Well, I think we have to start by dissecting this massive paradigm shift, because this isn't just about, working slightly fewer hours on a Friday. It is about redefining the fundamental metrics of human compensation.
Okay, break that down for me.
So the traditional rulebook demands that we hoard wealth for a future that is not only unguaranteed, but if we're being real biologically, less optimal for actually enjoying that wealth.
Because you're older, right? You're saving it all for when your knees hurt.
Exactly. But we're shifting toward a model where the goal is cultivating options in the present, right now.
Let's ground this immediately in a story from the source text, because I think it perfectly illustrates the danger of playing by that old rule book. Picture this. It's 1 a.m., you're 30,000 feet in the air on a flight over Las Vegas.
A classic setting for cautionary tale, honestly.
Oh, totally. And we have this guy named Mark sitting in first class. Mark's friends are all passed out drunk around him. And he extends his hand, and he is wearing this enormous, cartoonishly large diamond ring.
And the visual of that ring is so important here, right? Because it's the ultimate, undeniable symbol of overt wealth. It's an aggressive broadcast of status.
Yeah, he wants you to know he has money. Yeah. And Mark is a legitimate magnate. He runs gas stations, convenience stores, gambling operations all over South Carolina.
A real empire.
A huge empire. And he casually mentions that on an average Vegas weekend, he and his buddies might drop $500,000 to $1 million. Each. Exactly. So, by every traditional metric of society, Mark has won the game. He's at the absolute pinnacle of success. But then in the story, he's asked this very simple question. Of all your businesses, which did you like the most?
And his answer is just chilling because it's so immediate. He says, none of them.
None of them. He confesses that he's spent more than 30 years of his life with people he doesn't even like just to buy things he absolutely does not need.
Yeah.
I mean, he's on his third trophy wife. His life is just a succession of expensive cars and empty bragging rights.
Right. The text refers to him as the epitome of the living dead.
Which is such a brutal phrase. But it fits.
It does fit. And the tragic irony of Mark's existence is that it serves as our primary cautionary tale. He achieved absolute financial wealth. I mean, this is the exact kind of money that drives millions of people to work 80-hour weeks in the hopes of one day getting there.
All right, people are grinding themselves into dust trying to be Mark.
Exactly. Yet, when you look at the architecture of his daily life, he lacks any semblance of purpose. He has no time freedom. When you strip away the million-dollar Vegas losses and the diamond rings, you are left with a man who realizes he has essentially traded the best decades of his physical and mental life for a pile of cash and a deep, inescapable sense of emptiness.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second, because I think we really need to look critically at the cultural narrative here. Society conditions you, all of us listening to, look at a guy like Mark and feel envy.
Oh, absolutely.
We are taught to idolize his net worth while completely ignoring the mechanics of his misery. It's like, okay, it's like Mark is a hamster who somehow won the lottery, but instead of leaving the cage, he just went out and bought himself a solid gold hamster wheel.
I love that analogy.
Right. He's still running in circles. It's just a shinier trap.
Yeah, the gold wheel doesn't change the nature of the cage at all. But the reason that trap is so seductive is because society structurally reinforces the gold wheel. We use this single metric net worth to define human success.
We see the private jets and the first-class tickets, and we just assume.
We assume a high quality of life is a natural, guaranteed byproduct of a high net worth. But Mark's story forces us to look under the hood of that assumption. He's totally bankrupt in the currencies that actually matter: autonomy, purpose, and joy.
But wait, why doesn't he just stop? I mean, if he has all this money, why is he still flying around losing $1 million a weekend with people he openly dislikes?
It's the sunk cost fallacy, and it's deeply tied to his identity. When you've spent 30 years building a persona based on out-earning and outspending everyone in the room, walking away from that means admitting that the last 3 decades were built on a completely flawed premise.
Oof, yeah, that's heavy.
It is. It requires a massive ego death to step off the gold wheel. He has optimized his entire existence for absolute income, completely neglecting the lifestyle output of that income.
Which really challenges you, the listener, right now, to evaluate your own life path. Like, are you building a business or climbing some corporate ladder in a career that you will ultimately despise just to buy things you don't actually need?
And that evaluation brings us to the core philosophical divide we are exploring today. This is the divide between the deferrers, those living the deferred life plan, and the new rich.
And to be clear, this isn't a difference in tax brackets.
No, not at all. It's a fundamental difference in the mechanics of how they construct their reality.
So let's really break this down, because the nuance in these comparisons is where the actual mechanics of lifestyle design live. Let's look at the goals of the deferrers versus the new rich.
We really have to analyze the specific actions required to achieve these contrasting goals, too, because the wording can seem subtle on the surface, but the operational realities are just worlds apart.
Okay, take the first one. The deferr's goal is to work for yourself, but the new rich goal is to have others work for you. Now, on the surface, working for yourself sounds like the ultimate dream, right? You escape the 9-to-5, you start a consulting firm or a bakery, and bam, you are your own boss.
Right, but the problem with the work for yourself model is that you usually just end up creating a new job where you are the worst boss you've ever had.
That's so true.
You transition from working 40 hours a week for a faceless corporation to working 80 hours a week for yourself. You haven't bought freedom. You've literally just changed the logo on your shackles.
I can definitely see that. When you're a solo entrepreneur, if you stop working, the income stops. You take a sick day, you lose money. You are still directly trading your time for dollars.
Precisely. And the new rich approach this fundamentally differently. Their goal is to build systems. They want to decouple their personal time from the generation of income entirely.
So they don't want to be the one baking the bread.
No, they don't want to be the primary gear in the machine. They want to design the machine, hire people to maintain the gears, and then step away.
Wow. Okay, that leads directly into the next comparison. The deferrer wants to work when they want to, but the new rich want to prevent work for work's sake and to do the minimum necessary for maximum effect. The text calls this the minimum effective load.
Yeah, and this is huge because we have a culture of busyness that just constantly equates exhaustion with importance.
Right, the whole hustle culture thing?
Exactly. So a deferrer who has managed to negotiate flexible hours might still feel this weird psychological compulsion to sit at their laptop for 8 hours a day, simply because that is the socially accepted duration of a day's work.
But wait, let me push back on this. If someone is aiming for the minimum effective load, aren't they just being lazy?
Yeah.
Like if you can achieve a goal in 2 hours instead of 8, shouldn't you spend those remaining 6 hours doing more work to get further ahead?
Well, that assumes more work linearly equals more results, which is a massive fallacy. This concept relies heavily on Pareto's law or the 80-20 principle.
Right, where 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts.
Exactly. The new rich ruthlessly identify that 20%. If a task doesn't yield a significant return, they just don't do it. They refuse to invent work just to fill an 8-hour block on a calendar. It is about extreme effectiveness over mere efficiency.
So what's the difference there?
Efficiency is doing things right, but effectiveness is doing the right things.
Oh, that makes total sense. Doing something unimportant really well does not suddenly make it important.
Exactly.
Okay, here's a massive shift in perspective from the source. The deferrer's goal is to retire early or young. But the new rich goal is to distribute recovery periods and adventures, what are called mini retirements throughout life on a regular basis.
Because the entire concept of a 40-year grind followed by a complete cessation of work is biologically and economically flawed.
Biologically flawed. How so?
Well, the new rich recognize that human physical capacity and our deep interests wax and wane. Why on earth would you save all your travel, your physical adventures, and your exploration for a time when your joints might be failing and your energy is low?
Right, when you're 65 or 70.
Yeah.
I get the appeal of taking a 6-month mini retirement at age 30, but how does that actually work in reality? Like, if I leave my career for 6 months, corporate America isn't just going to hold my desk open for me. Doesn't this completely destroy your resume and your earning potential?
Well, it destroys your potential in a traditional, rigid corporate ladder, yes. But the new rich aren't playing that game anyway.
Oh, okay.
They are either negotiating sabbaticals based on their irreplaceability and high output, proving that their 20% effort is worth keeping around, or they have built those automated income systems we just discussed.
The machine that runs itself.
Exactly. Furthermore, they recognize that total inactivity isn't the actual goal of retirement anyway. The goal is doing what excites you. A mini retirement isn't just sitting on a beach for 6 months staring at the ocean. It might be learning a new language in Buenos Aires, or volunteering, or writing a book.
Right. The golden years shouldn't be the only years you actually get to live.
Exactly.
Okay, let's move to consumption. The defer wants to buy all the things they want to have. The new rich want to do all the things they want to do and be all the things they want to be.
It moves the focal point entirely away from accumulation and toward experience. Now, this doesn't mean the new rich take a vow of poverty.
Right, they aren't monks.
No, not at all. If tools or gadgets facilitate an experience like, say, buying top-tier scuba gear because you genuinely want to master diving, that is perfectly acceptable.
Because the gadget is a means to an end, not the end itself.
Right.
It's the difference between buying a $10,000 espresso machine just to show it off on your kitchen counter to your friends versus buying it because you genuinely want to spend your mornings mastering the art of pulling the perfect shot.
Exactly. Because the void of pure consumption is unfillable. Once you buy the expensive car, the high fades, and then you just need a more expensive car. Experiences, however, compound in value through memory and skill acquisition.
I love that. Now, for anyone in management listening, this next distinction is absolutely critical. The deferrer wants to be the boss instead of the employee, to be in charge. But the new rich want to be neither the boss nor the employee, but the owner. To own the trains and have someone else ensure they run on time.
This is a huge mental leap, because being the boss often means being the ultimate bottleneck in a company.
How so?
Well, every difficult decision, every major problem, every crisis flows directly up to you. You are completely tethered to the operation. But being the owner means you hold the equity, but you've installed management and systems to handle all that daily friction.
I look at it this way. Being the boss is basically being a glorified babysitter for a business. You're constantly putting out small fires. But being the owner is like holding the deed to an apartment building, but hiring a property manager. You collect the rent, sure, but you aren't the one getting the frantic phone call at 2 a.m. when a pipe bursts in Unit 4B.
That's a perfect analogy. The owner extracts value from the asset without directly trading their time for it.
And I know people are thinking this, how do you trust someone else to run your trains? If you step back and just become the owner, doesn't the quality of the business drop? Like, nobody cares about your baby as much as you do.
And that right there is the ego trap of the defer. You have to realize that a system run by a competent manager at 80% of your personal perfection level, but which requires 0 hours of your time, is infinitely more valuable than a system run at 100% perfection that requires 80 hours of your week.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you are trading a slight dip in absolute perfection for a massive life-changing return in personal freedom.
That requires letting go of a lot of ego. Wow. Okay, let's talk about the money itself. The deferrer wants to make a ton of money, just a big pile of cash. The new rich want to make a ton of money, but with specific reasons and defined dreams to chase, timelines and steps included.
This directly attacks the arbitrary nature of traditional financial planning. When someone says, I want to be a millionaire, they rarely know what they will actually do with the $1 million.
It's just a cool number.
Right. It's a socially agreed upon benchmark that sounds impressive at a dinner party. The new rich, instead, reverse engineer the actual cost of their ideal lifestyle. They calculate what the text calls a dream line.
And often, they find that living their absolute dream life costs significantly less than $1 million, which means they can achieve it years or even decades sooner than they thought. It's about knowing exactly why you are earning every single dollar.
Which brings us to perhaps the most profound psychological hurdle in this entire philosophy, the contrast regarding freedom.
Yeah, this one is deep.
The deferrer wants to have freedom from doing that which they dislike.
Hmm.
But the new rich want freedom from what they dislike, plus the freedom and resolve to pursue dreams without reverting to work for work's sake.
This feels like a trap that catches a lot of people off guard. When you finally eliminate this soul-crushing job or, when you finally fire those terrible clients, you don't just magically achieve bliss. You are left with a massive vacuum.
And nature hates a vacuum.
It really does.
If you don't have a deliberate plan for what to actually do with your newfound freedom, the psychological terror of a blank calendar will set in.
I've seen this happen. People retire or they sell their business, and within 3 months, they're absolutely miserable. They start subconsciously filling that vacuum with busy work. They invent crises.
Yes.
They start checking their email 20 times a day, or they pick fights with their homeowners association just to feel some sense of friction and productivity.
What's fascinating here is that the new rich understand that they don't actually hate work. They hate meaningless, mandatory work. After years of repetitive labor in a traditional job, your ability to dream and your hobbies have likely completely atrophied.
You forget how to play.
Exactly. You have to actively dig hard to find your passions again. You have to aggressively pursue the best in the world, not just spend your entire life running away from the worst.
You need to know what you're going to put into that vacuum once the bad work is gone. Otherwise, you'll just invite the bad work right back in. So, okay, we have this incredible philosophical framework, but how do we actually measure this? If we aren't using absolute net worth like the deferrers, what is the math behind lifestyle design?
The math relies on a concept called the freedom multiplier. It dictates that money is multiplied in practical value depending on the number of W's you control in your life.
The 4 W's: what you do, when you do it, where you do it, and with whom you do it.
Let's examine the contrast provided in the text to illustrate this because it's striking. Consider an investment banker making $500,000 a year.
Okay, doing great.
Right. By absolute standards, they are wealthy, but they work 80 hours a week in a high-stress office environment in a major, incredibly expensive city. Now, contrast them with a member of the new rich making $40,000 a year, but working 10 hours a week and controlling the where by living remotely.
So working from anywhere.
Right. For example, living in a private villa in the Andes, which costs a fraction of the rent in a standard U.S. city.
Okay, I understand the theory here, but I have to play devil's advocate for a second. If I'm making $40,000 living in the Andes, sure, I have a great view and lots of free time. But what about a safety net? What about high-end healthcare or saving for my kids' college? The investment banker might be stressed out of their mind, but they have $500,000 a year to throw at emergencies. Isn't the banker objectively safer?
That is a very common objection, but it fundamentally misunderstands the math of cost of living arbitrage.
Okay, explain that.
Think about the banker making $500,000 in Manhattan. They are paying nearly 50% in taxes right off the bat. Then exorbitant rent, commuting costs, dry cleaning, and crucially, spending heavily on stress relief just to cope with the 80-hour weeks.
Oh, the expensive dinners, the luxury vacations just to decompress.
Exactly. Their burn rate is massive. Now look at the $40,000 earner in the Andes. They have virtually zero stress-related expenses, significantly lower taxes, and a cost of living so low that their disposable income, their actual profit margin on their life, might actually be proportionally higher than the bankers.
That is a wild way to think about it. It's like, okay, here's where it gets really interesting. It's like currency exchange rates. When you travel and exchange dollars for euros, your purchasing power changes based on the market. But with the freedom multiplier, you aren't just exchanging dollars for pesos or euros, you are exchanging dollars for geography and time.
Exactly. By moving to a place with a lower cost of living and by freeing up 70 extra hours a week compared to that banker, that $40,000 is buying a daily lived experience, a lifestyle output that the $500,000 banker literally cannot afford because you don't have the time to purchase it.
Right, they're stuck in the office.
Absolute cash isn't a safety net if the process of acquiring it gives you a heart attack at age 25.
Man. So how are you, the listener, evaluating your compensation right now? Most of us just look at the top line of our paycheck. We see an $80,000 salary and we stop there. But you have to factor in how many W's you are sacrificing to get that check.
If your job dictates exactly when your alarm goes off, what specific building you must sit in for 9 hours, what mundane tasks you must perform, and who you have to tolerate in the cubicle next to you, your money has a remarkably low freedom multiplier.
You could be wealthy in cash, but entirely bankrupt in options. Absolute wealth, just having millions in the bank, and the ability to live a millionaire lifestyle are entirely disconnected.
And this is the most actionable takeaway of the whole section. You can drastically increase your wealth today, right now, just by reclaiming your W's, without making an extra dime in salary.
How?
If you negotiate working remotely, you instantly control the where. Your income's practical value shoots up because you can move to a cheaper zip code. If you shift your boss to a results-based evaluation rather than a time-based one, you control the when.
Because options equal real power. The ability to choose your daily reality is the ultimate luxury. But, and this is a big but getting those options usually requires us to fight against authority figures who want to keep us in traditional boxes.
Which is exactly why we need to examine the concept of lateral thinking and how the new rich responds to ultimatums.
The story of Dale Begg-Smith in the book is a masterclass in this. It's a perfect case study in rejecting the either-or paradigm that society constantly forces on us.
Dale's situation highlights the intense friction that occurs when someone tries to live a multidimensional life inside a unidimensional system.
So to set the scene for the listener, it's 2006, the Winter Olympics in Turin, Italy. Dale Begg-Smith is 21 years old. He executes a flawless backflip, lands perfectly, and wins the Olympic gold medal in mogul skiing. But Dale is not your typical starving Olympic athlete living out of a duffel bag and eating ramen. He drives a black Lamborghini.
Right, and he drives that Lamborghini because at age 13, he and his brother built a highly successful IT company that grew into a massive enterprise.
13. So he had these dual passions. He was a world-class athlete and a world-class entrepreneur. But in the traditional world of sports, there is a very rigid, dogmatic mindset. You must suffer, you must focus entirely on one thing, and any distraction is a betrayal of the sport.
And Dale was originally skiing for the Canadian national team. The Canadian coaches operated under this exact traditional dogma. They looked at Dale, who might be on his laptop closing a multi-million-dollar deal with clients in Tokyo while his teammates were doing extra stretching sessions, and they viewed it as a huge problem.
They gave him a brutal ultimatum. They basically told him he was spending too much time on his business and not enough time training. They presented him with a classic false dichotomy. Either you are a dedicated skier or you are a dedicated businessman. You cannot be both.
Authority figures love false dichotomies because they force compliance. The Canadian coaches wanted total control over his time and his focus. They fully expected him to capitulate and shut down his company.
But Dale didn't accept the premise of the argument. He looked at the ultimatum and realized the problem wasn't his business, and the problem wasn't his skiing. The problem was the environment. Instead of quitting his business, and instead of quitting skiing, he made what's called a lateral move.
Rather than fighting an unwinnable battle against the rigid rules of his current environment, he simply found a new system with different rules. He realized he was just spending too much time with Canadian coaches who had inflexible mindsets, so he moved to Australia.
He just picked up and left.
He did. Australia had a smaller, much more flexible ski team. They didn't care that he ran an IT company as long as he performed on the slopes. They accommodated his business schedule. And the result? He won Olympic gold for Australia, became a national hero there, and kept his multi-million-dollar business running the entire time.
It makes me think about how often we just accept the limitations placed on us by our bosses or our industries or just our culture. If a manager says, well, you can either get this promotion or you can have weekends off, we agonize over the choice. We assume that if a person in authority says, you have to choose, then choosing is our only option.
We treat their rules as laws of physics rather than just arbitrary corporate policies.
Yes. It's like trying to grow a palm tree in the snow. You can spend all your energy fighting the winter. You can build expensive greenhouses, put heaters in the frozen ground, and fight the elements every single day. Or you can just recognize that the environment is hostile, pick up the seed, and move to the tropics. Don't fight the winter. Just change the environment.
Now, obviously, most people listening aren't Olympic athletes or tech prodigies, but the principle of the lateral move applies to absolutely everyone.
Give me an example for a normal person.
Sure. If your current company refuses to let you work remotely, despite the fact that your job is entirely digital, You don't have to launch some massive crusade to change corporate HR policy. That is fighting the winter. The lateral move is simply finding a competitor who already embraces asynchronous remote work and taking your talents there.
When faced with an ultimatum between two things you value, your very first instinct should be to reject the premise. Don't assume the rules of your current game are the only rules that exist. Look for the environment where your desired lifestyle is not just permitted, but actively supported.
So, we have established the mechanics of the new rich. We understand the freedom multiplier and the power of lateral moves. But there is a massive psychological barrier we still need to cross, the psychology of escaping the deferral trap.
Because why do so many people stay stuck? Why do we know all of this, yet we still wake up and drive to the job we hate every day? Let's talk about Julie and Mark, because their story in the chapter attacks the heart of our cultural excuses.
Julie and Mark are the perfect counterargument to the myth of the perfect time.
So, Julie and Mark are a married couple with 3 young boys. And for nearly 2 decades, they shared this massive dream to sail around the world. But like most responsible adults, they relegated this dream to the back of the line. The responsibilities of normal life just kept piling up. Work commitments, paying the mortgage, putting the kids in the right schools.
The timeline just kept extending. Each passing year brought a new, perfectly logical reason for putting the trip off. The timing was never right.
We all do this. Oh, once I get the title bump, then I'll travel. Once the kids are in high school, then I'll start that business. But the goalposts always move.
Always. The perfect time is a pervasive, paralyzing myth. The universe will never give you an undeniable green light. The stars will never perfectly align.
And Julie finally had this harsh realization. She realized that if she didn't do it now, she would never do it. The rationalizations would just keep adding up, calcifying into permanence. So they pulled the trigger. They sold their things, bought a sailboat in France, and took off with 3 little boys on a 15-month, 15,000-mile trip across the globe.
And the data points of this trip are what completely shatter our cultural assumptions. Most people would assume that a 15-month global sailing trip for a family of 5 is the exclusive domain of billionaires.
I mean, I would assume that. It sounds wildly expensive.
But we have to look at the actual math, not the assumed math. When they finally completed the journey and sold the boat in New Caledonia, they calculated their net expenses. The entire 15-month exploration from Venice all the way to Polynesia cost them between $18,000 and $19,000 total.
That is staggering. That is less than what they would have paid just for rent and groceries back in Paris over that same 15-month period.
This is the freedom multiplier in action. By controlling the where and the when, they dramatically reduce their absolute costs while maximizing their lifestyle output. But beyond the finances, there is a fascinating psychological hurdle they overcame regarding their children.
Yes, and this is the ultimate objection I hear from people. I can't design my lifestyle or take a mini retirement because I have kids. It's selfish to disrupt their lives. But Julie and Mark found the exact opposite to be true. Pre-trip, their boys fought constantly. But learning to coexist in a small floating bedroom taught them deep patience and teamwork.
The educational benefit was profound. Before the trip, the kids hated reading. But on the open sea, isolated from digital distractions, they all learned to devour books. Exposing them to diverse cultures, real-time navigation, and real-world problem-solving for a year proved to be the most impactful educational investment they could have possibly made.
It really exposes how the things we claim limit us are often just culturally accepted excuses for our own fear of taking action. We say, I have to stay in this soul-crushing job for my kids. But what are we actually modeling for them? We are modeling a life of stress, deferral, and misery. We are teaching them that adulthood equals suffering.
And the source material provides multiple case studies to prove this isn't just a one-off anomaly. Consider Deb, a single mother who grew exhausted by icy commutes and the daily juggling act of childcare. Instead of waiting 30 years for retirement, she engineered a mini-retirement. She moved with her son to an alternative boarding school situated in a Florida forest.
She didn't have millions of dollars. She just changed her environment. They lived in a supportive community with a spring-fed pond and sunshine. She leveraged a lateral move.
And it isn't limited to families either. The text highlights Anthony, a young guy who hadn't even reached the legal drinking age. He absorbed these concepts, quit his job, backpacked through South America, and now hosts an annual convention. He didn't wait to accumulate a massive nest egg.
He didn't wait for permission. He calculated the actual cost of his dream and realized it was achievable right now. You cannot wait for the perfect time. You have to put the car in drive and navigate the intersections as you come to them.
The critical takeaway for the listener here is to calculate the actual literal cost of your dream. We call it a dream line. Don't guess. Don't just assume it requires $2 million. If you want to live in Tuscany for 6 months, go online right now and price out a 6-month lease. Price out the flights. Price out the food. Put hard numbers to it. It is almost certainly cheaper and more achievable than the narrative of impossibility you've constructed in your own head.
So what does this all mean? Let's weave all of these mechanical and philosophical threads together. Let's synthesize exactly what we've uncovered today. The absolute core of this message is a complete systemic redefinition of wealth.
True wealth is not a hoarded pile of cash sitting in an investment account, waiting to be accessed when you are 65 and physically declining. The story of Mark losing $1 million a weekend in Las Vegas proved that absolute money without purpose or time freedom is a tragic, empty victory.
Wealth is the continuous daily execution of options. It's the ability to wake up and decide what your day looks like. By controlling the 4 W's, what you do, when you do it, where you do it, and with whom you do it, you multiply the practical value of every single dollar you possess.
You must aggressively reject the either or paradox, just like Dale Begg-Smith did. You don't have to choose between professional success and personal lifestyle. You can find the lateral move that allows for both, even if it means changing your entire environment.
And finally, you have to refuse to wait for someday. Julie and Mark proved that someday is a myth that breeds regret. The kids aren't an excuse, the mortgage isn't an unmovable object, and the perfect time will never arrive. You can leverage the mechanics of the new rich to live a life of maximum output and minimal, meaningless labor right now.
It requires a monumental shift in perspective. You must transition from viewing work as a lifelong endurance test of your willpower to viewing it as a highly optimized, contained tool strictly used for funding the life you actually want to live.
It brings us right back to the question we started with. Can making $1 million a year make you poorer than someone making $40,000? Yes. If you are strapped to the golden hamster wheel, you are impoverished in time, bankrupt in mobility, and destitute in options. The ultimate luxury isn't the number in the bank. It's the freedom to step off the wheel entirely.
It's the profound realization that the cage door has actually been unlocked this entire time.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Now that you understand the mechanics of the new rich, you're going to need to unlearn almost everything society has taught you about success. So join us next time as we dive into rules that change the rules and discover why everything popular is usually dead wrong. Imagine, for a second, stepping into an arena for a national Chinese kickboxing championship.
Oh man, just the thought of it.
Right. I mean, you're looking across the mat at these competitors who have dedicated years, like literally their entire lives, to mastering this specific martial art.
They've got the broken bones, the thousands of hours in the gym.
Exactly. They've perfected their striking. And you, on the other hand, you have exactly 4 weeks of training.
Which is nothing. That's basically a month of hitting a bag.
It's absolutely nothing. But you step up onto this elevated fighting platform anyway, and a few hours later, you walk out with the gold medal.
Which just sounds impossible.
It sounds totally impossible. But the truly crazy part, the part that makes this sound like, I don't know, a fever dream or a terrible action movie, is that you win the entire national championship without throwing a single traditional punch.
Yeah, it really does sound completely made up.
Right. But it's a completely true story.
Yeah.
And it's actually the perfect illustration of what happens when you finally realize that the most powerful secret in business, in structuring your lifestyle, and really just in reclaiming your time, is simply this. Everything popular is wrong.
It's such a powerful story because it completely shatters your baseline assumptions about how the world operates, you know?
Oh, for sure.
Because when you hear that someone won a martial arts championship without actually striking, your immediate thought is, well, they must have cheated.
Yeah, like the judges were rigged or something.
Right. But the reality is much more profound, and honestly, it serves as the foundation for what we're doing in today's deep dive.
Yes. Today we are digging deep into Chapter 2, Rules that Change the Rules.
We're looking at the fundamental mechanics of the rules we choose to live by. Like how identifying these socially reinforced illusions, the ones that trap people in a standard 9-to-5 existence, is the absolute prerequisite for creating a life of complete freedom.
Which is something I think everyone listening wants, right?
Absolutely. It's all about learning to rewrite those self-imposed rules today rather than, deferring your whole life to some distant future.
So let's go back to that kickboxing story, because the story itself comes from the author of our source text, who actually pulled this off in 1999 at the Sanchu National Championship. It's Chinese kickboxing.
Yeah.
And the way he did it, it wasn't through superior speed or like inventing a secret martial arts technique.
No, he just actually read the rule book.
Literally just read the manual.
Yeah, he looked at the system that everyone else was operating blindly within, and he just looked for the edges.
So how did he actually do it? Because it's kind of a wild strategy.
Well, he applied this level of lateral thinking to a physical combat sport that, most people only reserve for puzzle games or something.
Right.
He identified two very specific, highly legal loopholes that the entire kickboxing community was just ignoring, mostly out of tradition.
Okay, so what was the first loophole?
First, he looked at the weigh-in process. So the weigh-ins were held the day before the actual competition.
Okay. I see where this is going.
Yeah, so he used extreme dehydration techniques, and I should say he makes it abundantly clear in the text that no one should ever attempt this without strict medical supervision.
Definitely. Do not try this at home.
Right. But he dropped from 193 pounds down to 165 pounds in just 18 hours.
That is insane. That's almost 30 pounds in a day.
It's brutal. But he stepped on the scale, qualified for a significantly lower weight class, and then spent the next day hyperhydrating back up to his natural 193 pounds.
Wow.
So when he actually stepped onto the mat, he was fighting guys who were essentially 3 weight classes smaller than him.
Which is absolutely terrifying. If you're one of those 165-pound guys, you're looking across the ring at a guy pushing 200 pounds.
Exactly. But the weight manipulation, that was really only half of the strategy.
Right, because he still had to win the fight without knowing how to kickbox.
Right. And the real genius, or madness, depending on how you look at it, was how he actually won the matches. He read the fine print and found a technicality.
The platform rule.
Yes. The rule stated that if one combatant fell off the elevated fighting platform 3 times in a single round, their opponent automatically won by default.
By default? That is so funny.
So his entire martial arts strategy was reduced to a singular action. He didn't box. He didn't kick.
He just shoved them.
He just used his massive weight advantage to shove his opponents off the stage over and over again.
It's like playing Super Smash Bros. And just throwing people off the edge.
It really is. And he won all of his matches by technical knockout. He walked away a national champion, defeating these veterans with a decade of experience, all with just 4 weeks of very unconventional preparation.
See, what this exposes, I think, is the critical difference between official rules and assumed rules.
Yes, exactly.
Because the official rules of the sport dictated the weight class parameters and that platform out-of-bounds technicality. But the assumed rules, like the conventional wisdom that every other fighter just blindly accepted, dictated that you win a kickboxing match by, kicking and boxing.
Right, you're supposed to strike.
But the author realized that the literal constraints of the game allowed you to win just by leveraging gravity and mass. He didn't break a single rule of the sport.
Not one.
He just broke the psychological rules that the other competitors had imposed on themselves.
But, and I'm sure you're thinking this, if you describe this to a purist, they are going to be furious.
Oh, I have to push back a little here on behalf of those purists.
Yeah.
Because isn't shoving someone off a platform instead of, engaging in the art of the fight technically cheating the spirit of the sport?
That's the classic argument, yeah.
I mean, if you buy a ticket to watch a martial arts tournament and you just see a guy playing sumo shove,
yeah,
you're going to feel robbed.
Yeah.
Right? It feels like bending the ethics of the game to the breaking point.
And that is a very natural reaction. It's exactly the reaction the purists had at the time. It feels like a violation of the social contract of the sport.
Yeah.
But if you look historically at how any sport or any industry or really any lifestyle paradigm evolves, it always happens through someone doing the uncommon within the strict bounds of reality.
Because innovation always looks like heresy at first.
Always. And the source material actually brings up one of the greatest historical validations of this exact concept. Dick Fosbury at the 1968 Mexico City Olympics.
Oh, the Fosbury flock.
Exactly.
It's a legendary moment in sports history, but when you really break down what happened, It mirrors that kickboxing story perfectly.
It does, right down to the psychological resistance from the establishment. So prior to 1968, every high jumper in the world used a technique called the straddle.
Which, if you watch old footage, it looks ridiculous.
It really does. It looks like a person trying to awkwardly hurdle a tall fence.
Yeah.
They went over face forward, straddling the bar and landing on their feet or their side.
Right. It was just the unquestioned, socially reinforced rule of how a human being is supposed to clear a high bar.
But Dick Fosbury looks at the problem, which is just getting a human body over a bar, and he realizes the straddle technique forces the jumper's center of mass to go over the bar with them.
Which requires immense upward force.
Right, but he realizes that if he sprints at an angle, plants his foot, and throws himself over backward, head first, arching his spine.
His physical body goes over the bar, but his actual center of mass passes under the bar.
Yes. It's a pure physics hack.
He is essentially tricking gravity.
Exactly. But when he debuted this at the Olympics, the international coaches were aghast.
Oh, that they hated it.
They thought it was absurd, dangerous, and a total mockery of the sport's traditions. They were just shaking their heads in disbelief.
But the crowd loved it.
The crowd went wild. They were literally yelling, "Ole!" as he cleared 2.24 meters completely inverted and won the gold medal.
And look, you can't argue with gold. The establishment can complain all they want about the spirit of the sport, but physics doesn't care about tradition.
No, it doesn't.
By the time the 1980 Olympics rolled around, 13 out of the 16 finalists were using Fosbury's exact backward technique.
It shifted from being a bizarre, borderline offensive anomaly to the absolute gold standard of the sport.
The assumed rules were shattered, and a new reality was established. It really makes you realize that navigating life or business is often like playing a video game where everyone is bottlenecked in the main hallway.
Yeah, fighting tooth and nail to get through a locked door.
Exactly. And you just notice an open-air vent off to the side. You aren't breaking the code of the game. You just refuse to participate in the bottleneck.
That is the perfect way to frame it. You are seeking the path of least resistance within the programmed environment.
Right.
And if you are sitting in a cubicle right now, listening to this, or grinding away at a business, the immediate question to ask yourself is, where are you walking down the crowded hallway just because everyone else is doing it?
What are the assumed rules in your specific daily reality?
Well, the author actually experienced this firsthand in the corporate world before he was a kickboxing champion. He was working in data storage sales.
Oh, right.
And the unquestioned assumed rule of sales is that you make your cold calls between 9:00 a.m. and 5:00 p.m.
Because that is when business happens.
Right. But he realized that making calls during those hours was incredibly inefficient, because that is exactly when the gatekeepers, the receptionists, the executive assistants, are at their desks.
And their whole job is to screen calls and protect their boss's time.
Exactly. The conventional wisdom was creating the bottleneck. So instead of trying to be a better, more persuasive caller during the bottleneck, he just stepped out of it.
He shifted his calling window, didn't he?
He did. He shifted his calls to 8:00 to 8:30 in the morning and 6:00 to 6:30 in the evening.
Which is brilliant, because who is at the office at 8:00 or 6:30 p.m.?
The highly driven senior executives.
The exact decision makers he needed to reach.
Yeah.
And the gatekeepers haven't clocked in yet, or they have already gone home.
So the phone rings straight through to the CEO's desk.
Wow.
By simply shifting his timeline by an hour, he bypassed the entire defense system of the corporate structure.
That's amazing.
He booked twice as many sales meetings in 1/8 the time of the senior sales executives at his company.
He worked fundamentally less, but achieved exponentially more.
Yes, because he recognized that different is better when it is more effective. When you see an entire industry solving a problem one way, and they are all stressed, overworked, and getting mediocre results.
That is the clearest signal imaginable to ask yourself, what would happen if I did the exact opposite?
Doing the exact opposite of the norm is a terrifying prospect for most people, but it is clearly where the leverage is.
But, this concept doesn't just apply to how we make sales calls or how we play sports.
Oh, it goes much deeper.
If we accept that the daily operational rules of the game can be rewritten, we eventually have to look up and question the ultimate finish line of the game itself.
The grand prize.
Exactly. We have to look at the prize that society promises us. We just follow all the rules for 40 years. And that brings us to the first major paradigm shift of what the author calls the new rich lifestyle.
And that is the concept of retirement.
Which is where the philosophy gets deeply uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Very uncomfortable. because it attacks the central pillar of the modern working life. The argument presented is that retirement as a primary goal is fundamentally flawed.
I could hear the collective gasp of financial planners everywhere.
Right. But the premise is that it should be viewed exclusively as worst-case scenario insurance, not as the ultimate triumph or purpose of your working years.
Because we are indoctrinated from a very young age to view retirement as the holy grail. You put your head down, you grind, you contribute to the 401k, you clip coupons, you endure the commute.
And your reward at age 65 is a golden ticket.
Yes. You finally get to travel, you get to read books on a beach, you get to spend time with your family. It is positioned as the grand redemption for decades of labor.
But how can something so universally accepted as the goal of life be fundamentally flawed?
Well, the author dissects this grand redemption narrative and exposes 3 massive underlying flaws.
Let's break those down. What's the first one?
The first flaw is the tragic biological and chronological assumption it makes. The traditional retirement model demands that you spend the absolute most vibrant, physically capable, and energetic years of your life.
Your 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Right. It demands you spend them doing something you actively dislike, or at best, merely tolerate. You are sacrificing your prime physical existence to fund a hypothetical period at the very end of your life.
You are trading the years when your knees actually work for the years when you might need a hip replacement.
It's an incredibly bleak trade when you strip away the romanticism.
Yeah.
You are hoarding all of your vitality for a time when you will biologically have the least amount of it.
It really is. It assumes a massive guaranteed sacrifice for a highly variable payoff.
Exactly.
But even if you ignore the biological tragedy of it, the second flaw is just pure cold mathematics.
The money doesn't work out.
The financial model of traditional retirement is breaking down rapidly because of inflation, the rising cost of healthcare, and the fact that modern medicine means a retirement could now span 30 years, like from age 65 to 95.
Yeah, the old targets simply don't work anymore.
The idea that $1 million in the bank is going to allow you to live like royalty on a yacht for 3 decades is a mathematical illusion.
If inflation eats away at your purchasing power by 2, 3, or 4% every single year, that $1 million is going to feel very small, very fast.
It will. For the vast majority of people who manage to hit that traditional savings goal, they aren't retiring to a life of limitless luxury.
What are they retiring to?
They are retiring to a fixed income existence defined by careful budgeting and lower middle class financial anxiety. They sacrificed 40 years of their life just to worry about the cost of groceries in their 70s.
Ouch. That is grim.
It is.
But let's look at the outliers. Let's say you aren't the average earner. Let's say you are a hyper-driven executive, an absolute machine.
Okay, sure.
You work 80 hours a week, you build a massive company, and you manage to save $10 million by the time you were 60. You've beaten the math. You have enough money to outrun inflation and buy the yacht. Doesn't the retirement model work perfectly for that person?
Paradoxically, that is the person for whom the retirement model fails the hardest, psychologically.
Wait, really?
Yeah, and this is the third flaw. If you are the type of ambitious, relentless, hardworking machine capable of generating and saving $10 million, you are fundamentally wired for action.
Right. Your entire identity and dopamine system are tied to achievement.
Tied to problem solving and forward momentum. If you take that machine and suddenly flip the switch to zero activity, if you force that person to just sit on a beach with no goals and no friction, they will mentally implode.
Oh, the imagery used in the text to describe this is absolutely brutal.
What does he say?
He says that if you are that type of driven person, 1 week into retirement, you'll be so damn bored that you'll want to stick bicycle spokes in your eyes.
Whoa. It's a graphic description, but it captures the psychological torment of profound stagnation.
A highly capable person cannot handle a life devoid of purpose.
So what inevitably happens to these hyperachievers when they retire? Within a month, they are either deeply depressed, they are driving their spouse crazy, or
Ends up just starting another company.
or joining a board of directors, they go back to work. So the entire concept of deferring your life for 40 years to finally do nothing defeats its own purpose. Because doing nothing is psychological torture for the people who actually succeed at the highest levels of the game.
I want to clarify something critical here, though, because if someone is listening to this on their way to work, they might be thinking, great, the deep dive told me retirement is a scam, so I'm going to drain my 401k, buy a sports car, and move to Vegas.
Please don't do that.
Yeah, that sounds incredibly reckless. Is the takeaway here to just abandon all future planning?
Absolutely not, and it is vital to draw that distinction. The philosophy is not advocating for financial nihilism.
Okay, good.
The author explicitly states that he maxes out his own 401ks and IRAs, primarily to leverage the tax benefits. Planning for the future is necessary. You absolutely must plan for the worst-case scenario.
The scenario where you become physically incapable of working, or the economy shifts, and you need a reservoir of capital just to survive.
Exactly. You still build the safety net.
Right. But the paradigm shift is understanding the difference between building a safety net and making the safety net your entire reason for living.
Yes, you buy life insurance because it is a responsible way to protect against a worst-case scenario. But you don't wake up every morning excited about your life insurance policy.
You aren't actively hoping to die so you can cash it in.
Retirement should be viewed the exact same way. It is a necessary insurance policy against old age and infirmity, but it should not be the singular light at the end of the tunnel that you are sacrificing your current existence to reach.
That makes perfect sense. Stop viewing retirement as your redemption. But if we accept that hoarding all of our rest, all of our adventure, and all of our freedom for the final 2 decades of life is a flawed model, it immediately begs a structural question.
Which is?
If we aren't saving all the good stuff for the end, how are we supposed to organize our time right now, in the present?
And that leads to the concept of cyclical energy and the absolute necessity of what the author terms mini-retirements.
Mini-retirements, I love that term.
It's great because the default assumption of the corporate structure is that human beings are capable of linear output. The system assumes you can graduate college at 22 and then consistently push a boulder up a hill for 8 to 10 hours a day, 50 weeks a year, for 40 consecutive years.
With only a 2-week vacation to briefly catch your breath.
It treats human beings like combustion engines. As long as you keep putting coffee in the tank, the engine should run at the exact same RPMs for 4 decades.
But human biology and psychology are fundamentally not linear. They're cyclical.
Exactly. Our interest, our physical capacity, and our mental endurance naturally wax and wane. We require periods of intense exertion followed by periods of profound recovery.
There's this fascinating hypothetical in the source text that highlights the absurdity of the linear work model.
Ah, the $10 million one.
Yeah. If someone offered you $10 million tax-free to work 24 hours a day for 15 years straight, and then you could retire with that fortune, would you take the deal?
You physically couldn't take the deal. It's a biological impossibility. If you try to stay awake and work for 24 hours a day, you will be dead in a matter of weeks, let alone 15 years.
It is a spectacular failure of sustainability. Yet, the author points out that this is essentially what the modern workforce is attempting to do on a slightly more protracted scale.
They are trying to maintain a relentless, unyielding pace of high-stress output for decades without meaningful recovery.
And the results are completely visible.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
This is why you see overworked 30-somethings who look like they are 50, aging prematurely.
Suffering from chronic stress disorders.
And fueling their impossible workloads with triple bypass espresso drinks just to stay conscious at their desks.
I always think of it like the difference between running an endless marathon and doing high-intensity interval training.
Oh, that's a good analogy.
Because when you are running a 40-year marathon, you can never actually sprint. You are just constantly grinding, preserving energy, suffering through the miles, and trying not to collapse.
But interval training is completely different.
You sprint as hard as you possibly can, you give it everything you have, and then you completely stop. You recover. You catch your breath, and then you sprint again.
You actually get faster, you get stronger, and you might actually enjoy the exertion because you know a period of complete rest is guaranteed to follow.
That interval analogy maps perfectly onto the concept of the mini-retirement. Instead of taking one massive final binge of rest at the end of your life, you systematically distribute that recovery period throughout your active working years.
The author operates on a really specific rhythm. He aims for 1 month of complete overseas relocation or high-intensity learning for every 2 months of focused work projects.
He sprints for 2 months, building a business, launching a product, and then he just unplugs and goes to Argentina to learn tango for a month.
Or he goes to Thailand to train in kickboxing.
And notice the distinction there. A mini-retirement is not a 2-week vacation to a crowded resort where you are still frantically checking your emails under a beach umbrella.
Stressing about what is piling up on your desk.
Right. A mini-retirement is a genuine relocation, an immersion into a new environment or skill, and a complete disconnection from the daily grind.
It is a total reset of the cyclical energy system. You return to the sprint phase with renewed creativity and endurance.
It sounds idyllic. It sounds like the way life should be lived.
It does.
But if mini retirements are so biologically and psychologically beneficial, and if the 40-year marathon is actively destroying our health, why is it so rare?
That's the big question.
If you tell your coworkers you are taking a month off to go learn a language in Spain, they look at you like you are insane. What is stopping people from stepping away?
What stops them is a deeply ingrained cultural conditioning around the definition of work and worth. It usually manifests as a profound fear of being perceived as lazy, combined with the illusion that they are just waiting for the perfect moment to take action.
We really need to unpack that because it requires a complete redefinition of what laziness actually is and identifying what the author calls the someday disease.
Let's look at the cultural conditioning first, because society heavily rewards personal sacrifice over actual productivity.
We have built a culture that measures a person's value by the sheer volume of time they surrendered to their employer, regardless of what they are actually accomplishing during that time.
We fetishize busyness. The person who stays at the office until 8:00 p.m. every night, sacrificing their family dinners and their health, is universally praised as the hard worker.
Even if they spent 4 of those hours browsing the internet, chatting at the water cooler, or doing low-value administrative tasks.
The optics of sacrifice are rewarded. Therefore, doing less, meaningless work in order to focus your energy on things of greater personal importance, like a mini retirement, is incredibly difficult for people to stomach.
It feels wrong because it doesn't look like you're suffering enough.
If you aren't bleeding at your desk, you aren't earning your keep.
So how do we redefine laziness to escape that guilt trap?
The author provides a radical redefinition. Laziness is not resting. Laziness is not taking a month off to learn tango.
So what is it?
True laziness is enduring a non-ideal existence.
Oh, wow.
Laziness is letting circumstances or other people dictate the trajectory of your life because it is easier than fighting for what you want. Laziness is amassing a fortune while passing through life as a passive spectator, watching the world happen from the window of a corner office.
That reframing is a gut punch. Enduring a life you hate because you were too afraid to change it is the ultimate form of laziness.
It requires zero courage to just maintain the status quo and complain about it. It requires immense courage to actually engineer a break and step away.
And part of how we justify that status quo laziness to ourselves is by convincing ourselves that we are just waiting for the right timing. We tell ourselves we aren't scared, we are just being prudent.
The author shares a wonderful, very human anecdote about this. He asked his mother how she and his father decided when was the right time to have him, their first child.
And her answer was profound in its absolute simplicity.
The timing is never right to have a baby.
Ask any parent listening to this, and they will tell you that is the absolute, unvarnished truth.
Oh, yeah. There is never enough money in the savings account. The house is never quite big enough.
Your career is never perfectly settled. The geopolitical climate is never totally stable.
If you sit down with a spreadsheet and wait for the perfect, frictionless moment to have a child, you will never have one. The math never perfectly aligns.
And that logic applies to every major life change. But the mind plays tricks on us. People constantly move the goalposts to justify their inaction. Today they say, I'll ask to work remotely as soon as I get this next promotion.
But I want to defend the cautious listener for a second. What if waiting for that promotion is just good strategy? Like, if you ask for remote work when you have more leverage, aren't you more likely to get it? Is it really a disease to wait for a tactical advantage?
Well, strategy is important, but there is a massive difference between a defined, immediate tactical delay and the perpetual moving of goalposts.
Right, because what usually happens is you get the promotion and then you say, well, I need to spend 6 months proving myself in this new role before I ask for remote work.
And then 6 months pass, and you say, well, the economy is looking a little shaky. I shouldn't rock the boat right now. I'll wait until the new fiscal year.
The stars will never align perfectly. The traffic lights of life will never all be green at the same time.
The universe is not conspiring against you, but it is certainly not going to go out of its way to line up all the pins for a perfect strike.
Someday is a disease that will take your dreams to the grave.
That is a quote that should be written on a sticky note on every monitor.
Truly, if an endeavor is truly important to you, whether it's starting a business, traveling, or restructuring your job, you have to initiate it immediately.
You can correct your course along the way, but you cannot steer a parked car. You have to get the vehicle in motion and deal with the friction as it comes.
Getting into motion, however, requires overcoming another deep-seated behavioral habit. To take immediate action and cure this someday disease, you have to completely stop seeking consensus and approval from everyone around you.
You have to change how you interact with authority.
Exactly. And this brings us to a fascinating dual concept. The power of asking for forgiveness instead of permission, combined with a total focus on emphasizing your strengths.
Let's look at the permission trap first. Because from the time we are in kindergarten, we are conditioned to raise our hands and ask, "May I?"
Can I go to the bathroom? Can I start this project? Can I try this new marketing channel?
The author is telling us to completely rip up that social contract.
Because the moment you ask for permission, you are handing the other person the power to say no.
And to understand why this is a trap, you have to understand the psychology of the person you are asking.
If you ask a boss, a partner, or a parent for permission to do something unconventional, they are very likely to deny the request based on pure emotional reflex.
Why is the default answer almost always no?
Well, because saying yes requires them to evaluate a new paradigm, calculate the risks, and accept potential responsibility if things go wrong. It disrupts their routine. It introduces the unknown.
It is infinitely easier and safer for them to just say, no, keep doing it the old way. It is a defensive reflex.
However, if you don't ask and you simply put the project into motion, if you start the new marketing campaign or you just start working from home on a Friday, the psychological dynamic completely flips.
People are incredibly hesitant to step in and stop a moving train.
Right. Once the action is a reality, they can learn to accept it, provided it isn't causing a catastrophe.
It's the difference between asking someone to imagine a change versus asking someone to physically dismantle a change that is already working.
But there is a massive caveat here that we need to emphasize.
Oh, absolutely. We aren't telling people to go commit corporate sabotage or ruin their marriages.
The rule of asking for forgiveness over permission comes with a strict boundary condition. You only use this approach if the potential damage of your action is moderate and reversible.
You do not use this strategy for things that will bankrupt the company, get you fired for gross negligence, or destroy your relationship.
If a decision is irreversible, you have a discussion. But if you are just testing a new workflow or trying a new software or experimenting with your hours, don't give them the chance to stop you before you even begin.
You get very good at being a strategic troublemaker. Become a master of saying, "I'm so sorry. I truly thought this was the most efficient way to handle it. I'll revert to the old way," instead of constantly asking, "May I please try something different?"
And this idea of leaning into momentum ties directly into how we view our own skills. Because we are taught to ask permission, we are also taught to constantly fix our flaws. We are obsessed with being well-rounded.
The standard personal development model is entirely focused on identifying your weaknesses and spending years trying to correct them.
If you are bad at public speaking, you are told to join Toastmasters. If you are bad at math, you get a tutor.
But the author completely dismantles this approach. He argues that spending your limited energy trying to fix a natural weakness almost always results in incremental, frustrating improvements that lead straight to mediocrity.
He is actually incredibly self-deprecating about his own physical limitations to illustrate this point.
Oh, yeah. He talks about trying to learn how to swim, and despite his best efforts, he says he looked like a drowning monkey.
A drowning monkey, it's such a funny image.
And he tried to play basketball. And because of his build and lack of coordination on the court, he looked like a caveman.
Now, he could have spent thousands of hours and thousands of dollars on elite swim coaches and basketball camps.
And if he dedicated years to it, he might have elevated himself from drowning monkey to highly mediocre, slightly below average swimmer.
Which would have been a massive expenditure of energy for a minimal, uninspiring return.
Instead, he recognized what his body was actually built for. He had a natural propensity for lifting and throwing heavy objects.
So he abandoned the swimming pool and the basketball court, leaned entirely into his natural strength, became a fighter, and won a national championship.
It is exactly like trying to teach a cat to bark.
To bark?
Yeah. You can spend years training a cat. You can hire the best animal behaviorists on the planet, and maybe, after 5 grueling years of conditioning, the cat might let out a tiny, pathetic little woof.
That sounds exhausting for everyone involved.
It's incredibly frustrating for you as the trainer, it deeply annoys the cat, and at the end of the day, you still have a terrible guard dog.
The solution isn't to fix the cat. The solution is to just get a dog.
Weaponize your natural strength.
Yeah.
Do not waste your brief life trying to become a mediocre version of something you are not naturally built for.
That analogy perfectly captures the futility of the weakness-fixing paradigm. The choice is stark. You can choose the painful incremental improvement of your flaws, which leads to average performance, or you can choose the exponential multiplication of results by leveraging your natural strengths.
Focus your time and energy entirely on the handful of things you are naturally excellent at.
As for your weaknesses, either ignore them if they aren't critical or find a way to outsource them to someone who possesses that exact skill as their natural strength.
It's a completely liberating way to look at yourself. You don't have to be good at everything. You just have to be exceptional at a few things.
But this leads us into a very dangerous psychological territory. Because when people stop asking for permission and they start multiplying their strengths, what usually happens is they become very successful, their income spikes.
They start crushing it in their career or their business.
And that financial success often lures them into the most deceptive trap of all, the money scapegoat.
This is perhaps the most profound psychological insight in the entire text. It addresses the emotional reality of wealth and time.
The core rule here is that money alone is not the solution. Now, that sounds like a tired cliche, money doesn't buy happiness, but the author isn't just reciting a platitude.
No, he is offering a deep analysis of how we actively use the pursuit of money as a psychological shield to protect ourselves from existential dread.
Let's break that down, because if you stop anyone on the street and ask them what their biggest problem is, the answer is almost always a variation of, I just need more money.
If I just got a 20% raise, if my business just hit $1 million in revenue, all my stress would vanish.
But the author points out that uttering the phrase, if only I had more money, is the absolute easiest, most socially acceptable way to postpone intense, uncomfortable self-examination.
We use the daily grind, the 80-hour work weeks, the endless pursuit of the next promotion as a money wheel.
We run on this wheel to artificially busy ourselves. We manufacture urgency and stress specifically so we don't have to face the gaping void in our lives.
It's a distraction mechanism. We use our busyness as an excuse for our lack of purpose. He writes that we use work as a defense. I'd love to talk about the gaping void I feel in my life, but I have so much work to do. I've got 3 hours of emails to reply to. I have a Q3 report to file.
We invent tasks. We volunteer for extra projects. We keep the noise level of our lives turned up to a 10 so we never have to sit quietly in an empty room with our own thoughts.
Because if you strip away the 80-hour work week, if you suddenly remove the constant pressure of surviving and earning, you are left alone with yourself.
And if you haven't taken the time to define what actually brings you joy, what gives your life meaning, and what excites you outside of professional validation, that sudden expanse of free time is utterly terrifying.
Which perfectly illustrates another philosophical rule from the text. Things in excess become their opposite.
Yes, it is a fundamental law of nature and psychology. Too much of a supposed blessing becomes a curse.
The author gives the example of how extreme pacifists, when pushed to the absolute brink, can become militants.
In the context of lifestyle design, an excess of idle time with no friction, no purpose, and no demands becomes toxic.
It doesn't lead to peace. It leads to depression, anxiety, obsessive self-doubt, and a feeling of profound worthlessness.
But wait, I have to stop you there and challenge this on behalf of the listener.
Okay, go for it.
We have spent this entire deep dive talking about how the 9-to-5 is a trap, how we need to bypass gatekeepers, stop deferring retirement, and free up our time. And now you are telling me that if I actually achieve all of that, if I successfully engineer a 4-hour work week, the resulting free time is going to be toxic and eat me alive.
That is the exact paradox he is addressing.
Yeah.
And it is the trap that many newly wealthy or retired people fall into. The goal of lifestyle design, the goal of the new rich, is not to create an excess of idle time so you can sit on a couch and stare at a wall.
So what is the goal?
The goal is the positive use of free time.
Positive use. Okay, define that.
It is about replacing the work you are obligated to do just to survive with activities you want to do to thrive. It is about clearing the mandatory calendar so you have the freedom to pursue high-intensity learning, to engage in meaningful service or charity, to build deep relationships, or to create art.
It is the vast difference between being unemployed and drifting versus being independently wealthy and highly active.
You still need a reason to get out of bed. You just want to be the one choosing what that reason is.
So the warning here is to stop using the blind pursuit of cash as a scapegoat for your lack of purpose.
Do not say, I'll figure out what makes me happy once I have $2 million in the bank.
You have to define what actually makes you fulfilled before you pull the ripcord and free up all your time, or that sudden vacuum of time will destroy you.
Exactly. And this realization requires a complete reevaluation of how we measure wealth in the first place.
Right, because if absolute cash in the bank isn't the true metric for a successful, well-designed life, how exactly do the new rich keep score?
How do we measure financial success, if not by the size of the pile?
That brings us to a mathematical concept that completely breaks people's brains the first time they encounter it.
It is the distinction between absolute income and relative income. And the rule is that relative income is far more important.
Let's walk through the scenario the author uses because it lays it out perfectly.
Let's start with absolute income, which is how 99% of the world measures wealth. Absolute income measures exactly one variable, the raw, almighty dollar amount.
Let's look at two hypothetical individuals. Jane makes $100,000 a year. John makes $50,000 a year. In absolute terms, according to society, according to the IRS, and according to anyone looking at their W-2s, Jane is twice as rich as John. End of discussion.
Right. Jane wins the societal game. She can qualify for a bigger mortgage. She drives a luxury car. She wears nicer clothes.
But relative income introduces a second, completely critical variable that absolute income ignores: time. Specifically, how many hours of your actual life it takes to generate that money.
So let's look at the real trade happening in Jane's life. Jane makes $100,000 a year, but she is a high-powered corporate lawyer or a senior manager. She is working 80 hours a week, and she works 50 weeks a year.
That means she's trading 4,000 hours of her life every year to her employer. If you divide her $100,000 absolute income by the 4,000 hours she worked to get it, Jane is actually making $25 an hour.
Okay, now let's look at John's reality. John makes $50,000 a year in absolute income, but John has redesigned his lifestyle.
He has automated his online business, or he has negotiated a highly efficient remote work setup where he only actually works 10 hours a week.
That's 500 hours a year. If you divide his $50,000 by those 500 hours, John is making $100 an hour.
Therefore, in terms of relative income, John is 4 times richer than Jane. He makes 4 times as much money for every hour of his finite human life that he trades for cash.
When you look at it that way, Jane's life looks like a terrible deal. She is exhausted. She has no time for a mini retirement. She probably spends half her money on stress relief, expensive convenience foods, and dry cleaning just to maintain her 80-hour lifestyle.
Absolute income is like judging a car purely by its top speed on a track. You look at Jane's car and say, wow, it can go 200 miles an hour. She is the winner.
But relative income is looking at the fuel efficiency and the freedom to drive. It does not matter if Jane's car can go 200 miles an hour if she is constantly out of gas, constantly stressed, and has literally zero free time to ever take the car on a scenic drive.
John might have a car with a lower top speed, a lower absolute income, but he has unlimited fuel and the complete freedom to drive it wherever he wants on a Tuesday afternoon while Jane is stuck in a boardroom.
That analogy hits the core of it perfectly. The new rich optimize for time and mobility, not just raw cash.
Now, the author does add an incredibly important caveat to this math, so we remain grounded in reality. Relative income only works as your primary metric after your absolute income meets your basic needs to realize your goals.
Right? You can't game the math to the extreme. If you make $500 an hour, but you only work 1 hour a month, you only have $500. You have a massive relative income, but you can't pay your rent.
You can't claim victory with an absolute income of $12 a year just because you only worked for 2 seconds to earn it.
Precisely. Assuming your absolute income is sufficient to cover your baseline lifestyle and the costs of your dreams, your travel, your hobbies, your family, you should then shift your focus entirely to maximizing your relative per-hour income.
The goal is decoupling your time from your earnings. According to the text, the top new rich mavericks who have mastered this leverage often make upwards of $5,000 per hour in relative income.
Which is a staggering number to comprehend if you were used to an hourly wage. But making this shift, moving from grinding for absolute dollars to optimizing for relative time, bypassing gatekeepers, ignoring the rules, it fundamentally changes the type of stress you experience in your life.
And it is vital to understand that designing this life is not a stress-free endeavor, which brings us to our final key concept: the biological reality of stress, and the difference between distress and eustress.
There is a massive, very dangerous misconception that the ideal lifestyle, the one we were talking about designing, is completely devoid of all stress. People think the goal is a perfectly flatline existence.
But biologically and psychologically, not all stress is bad. In fact, a total lack of stress is catastrophic for a human being. The new rich do not seek to eliminate stress. They seek to eliminate bad stress while actively and aggressively hunting down good stress.
It's like gravity. If an astronaut stays in zero gravity for too long, without the stress of gravity pulling on their bones, their skeletal system actually deteriorates. They lose bone mass. We need friction to stay strong.
But we have to define the terms, because all friction isn't equal. Let's start with the bad stuff. Distress.
Distress refers to harmful stimuli that cause you to become weaker, less confident, and less capable. It is destructive friction.
This is the toxic boss who belittles you in front of the team. This is the anxiety of not knowing if you can make payroll next week.
This is sitting in 2 hours of gridlock traffic every morning, feeling your blood pressure spike. Or, as the author vividly puts it, it's the physical equivalent of smashing your face on a curb.
These are forms of distress. They break you down. We want to ruthlessly prune these out of our lives.
But then we have the opposite end of the spectrum, eustress. The prefix eustra is Greek for healthy or good, exactly as it is used in words like euphoria.
Eustress refers to stress that is healthful, positive, and acts as a direct stimulus for growth.
If we go back to the physical realm, eustress is what happens when you push yourself to hit a new personal record in the gym. When you're lifting a heavy weight, your muscle fibers are under extreme stress.
They are literally experiencing micro-tears.
But because of that specific, targeted stress, they repair themselves and grow stronger. It is the stress of taking a risk, like launching a new product or standing up to give a public speech.
It is terrifying. Your palms sweat, your heart rate spikes. But surviving that stress permanently expands your sphere of comfortable action.
Without eustress, there is absolutely no progress. If you systematically avoid all challenges, all criticism, all risk, and all stress, you do not achieve a state of Zen nirvana.
You achieve a state of severe mental and physical atrophy, followed by profound, life-draining boredom.
So if someone is listening to this and they have this mental image of a perfect lifestyle where they are just lying in a hammock, drinking margaritas all day, every day with absolutely zero stress, demands, or challenges, you are saying that is a myth.
It is worse than a myth. It is a recipe for depression. People who manage to build enough wealth to eliminate all stress from their lives, and who fail to replace it with chosen challenges, inevitably fall into a deep psychological rut.
The trick isn't eliminating stress from your life. It is learning to meticulously tell the difference between distress, which destroys you, and eustress, which builds you.
You have to become the curator of your own friction. You have to be equally aggressive in cutting distress out of your life.
Right.
Fire the toxic clients, quit the awful job, avoid the outrage cycle of the daily news, as you are in hunting down eustress.
Go find challenges that scare you just enough to force you to grow. Try to learn a new language, start the business, or, enter a national kickboxing tournament with only 4 weeks of training.
Exactly. As we synthesize everything we've explored today, looking at the entire arc of this philosophy, the absolute soul of this chapter, the core takeaway, is the realization that the real-world rules you've been taught to follow since childhood are not laws of physics.
They are merely a fragile collection of socially reinforced illusions and agreements.
Whether it is the unwritten assumption that you must work a linear 9-to-5 schedule, the unquestioned 40-year deferment of your life for a retirement that might not financially support you, or measuring your self-worth by the absolute dollars in your bank account rather than your relative freedom, these are all entirely optional games.
Exactly. You do not have to play them. And by defining what success actually looks like for you, by optimizing for relative income, by actively seeking out growth-inducing eustress, by planning cyclical mini-retirements, and by weaponizing your natural strengths instead of crying over your weaknesses, you aren't just trying to play the standard game a little bit better than the guy in the cubicle next to you.
You are doing what Dick Fosbury did when he jumped backward over that bar. You are doing what the author did when he walked onto that kickboxing mat and refused to throw a punch.
You are playing an entirely different game, with a set of rules explicitly designed for you to win.
It requires lateral thinking, yes. But more importantly, it requires the sheer courage to be seen as unreasonable or unrealistic by the people who are still securely trapped playing the old game.
But as the author so astutely notes, doing the unrealistic is often surprisingly easier than doing the realistic, because there is significantly less competition for the big, unconventional goals.
Everyone else is bottlenecked, fighting to the death over the mediocre, safe, predictable paths.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought to chew on.
We've spent this time talking about how the rules are completely negotiable and how most limits are self-imposed illusions.
But knowing that the rules are fake doesn't automatically make jumping out of the system any less terrifying. Fear is still a very real factor.
So here is a question to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
If you know deep down that inaction, staying paralyzed in a life you don't actually love, is genuinely the greatest risk of all, what exactly are you disguising as optimism just to avoid taking the leap?
Are you truly waiting for things to organically get better, or are you just too afraid to make the jump?
A fantastic, deeply uncomfortable, and absolutely vital question to leave you with. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been great.
Endings are just new beginnings. We'll see you on the next deep dive. Remember the kickboxer. Remember the Fosbury flop. Do not be afraid to rewrite the rules. So what if the biggest lie you've ever been told about success is that you need to be, realistic?
Right, like what if aiming for the impossible is actually, well, what if it's easier and has less competition than just settling for average?
It sounds completely backwards, when you first hear it.
Oh, totally. We are conditioned from childhood to temper our expectations, to play it safe, pick a lane that feels secure.
Invert the safe lane.
Exactly. But when you actually analyze the landscape of human ambition, that safe lane is exactly where the traffic jam is, the express lane. It's practically empty.
So if you're driving to work right now or maybe listening to this while doing the dishes, I want you to hold on to that thought.
It's a big one.
It is, because we are jumping straight into the system reset chapter of our source material today.
A true deep dive.
Right, and the mission here is to completely dismantle that societal conditioning that forces us into, boring, realistic goals.
Which is crucial for anyone interested in business or entrepreneurship.
Or, frankly, just breaking out of a soul-crushing routine.
Right.
This deep dive matters because we are going to unpack the exact mathematical formula and the psychological toolkit needed to define what you actually want out of life.
And calculate its true monthly cost, which is always shocking.
Always. So we can start achieving it immediately. No vague theories, just, practical, actionable architecture.
But to build that new architecture, we really have to first expose the fatal flaw in how we currently set our targets.
The old operating system.
Right. We operate under this assumption that high-level success is fiercely guarded, that it's locked away.
And to understand why that's an illusion, we have to look at the author's guest lecture at Princeton University, right?
Yeah, he was teaching a class on high-tech entrepreneurship.
And let's set the stage here, because this is important. This is a room full of brilliant, highly capable students.
Oh, the best of the best.
Right. Individuals who beat out thousands of applicants just to get a seat in that lecture hall. They are driven, they are smart.
But the author looks at them and realizes they're all on a track to become high-paid coffee fetchers.
Yeah, prepping themselves to work 80-hour weeks simply because they think that's the established path for smart kids.
So he needs to jolt them out of this hypnotic state of realistic ambition.
And he does that by issuing a challenge.
A challenge designed to be perceived as completely impossible.
He tells this room of 20 overachievers to contact 3 seemingly impossible to reach people. We're talking absolute top-tier luminaries.
The examples he gave were like Jennifer Lopez, Bill Clinton, J.D. Salinger, or the CEO of Google.
Just casually reach out to a former president.
Right. And the task was to get at least one of these luminaries to reply to 3 questions.
And to make sure motivation wasn't the issue, because, college kids, he offered a massive prize.
A round-trip plane ticket anywhere in the world to whoever completed the challenge with the most style.
So consider the variables here. You have a highly motivated cohort.
An incredibly desirable reward.
And the intellectual firepower to execute complex problem solving. It's a perfect petri dish for ambition.
It really is.
Now, if I'm guessing why this didn't work out, and spoiler alert, exactly 0 out of 20 students completed it the first year, I'd assume it's because, Ivy League kids are drowning in coursework.
That's what most people would think, yeah.
They probably looked at this, realized it wasn't graded, and decided, their time was better spent studying for finals.
It's a logical assumption, but it completely misses the underlying pathology here.
Wait, really? It wasn't time management?
Not at all. When he debriefed the students, time management wasn't the primary barrier. The barrier was a massive collective miscalculation of their environment.
What do you mean by that?
Well, every single student looked around that room, saw 19 other brilliant, intimidating peers, and thought the competition here is going to be incredibly fierce.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they thought, someone else is definitely going to figure this out, so I don't stand a chance.
They psyched themselves out before sending a single email.
Exactly. They suffered from this, compound form of imposter syndrome. They vastly overestimated the competition and completely underestimated themselves.
So not a single one of them even attempted to reach out.
Not one. They just assumed the task was impossible and the competition was insurmountable.
That is wild. But the narrative flips entirely the following year, doesn't it?
It really does. He teaches the exact same class, issues the exact same challenge, but this time he tells them the story of the first year.
He gives them the cheat code.
Right. He explicitly tells them that the fierce competition they are imagining just does not exist.
And the result is, what, 6 out of 17 students succeed in contacting billionaires and celebrities within 48 hours?
Within 48 hours, it's incredible. And that data point reveals a profound vulnerability in human psychology.
What is?
That 99% of people in the world are convinced they're incapable of achieving great things, so they instinctively aim for the mediocre.
They aim for the realistic.
Exactly. And paradoxically, this creates a situation where the fiercest competition in the world is for those realistic, average goals.
It's like my traffic jam analogy from earlier. Everyone is merging into the local lanes because the signs say realistic.
Right, and the local lanes are just gridlocked.
People are fighting bumper to bumper for, like, a 3% raise or an entry-level promotion. Meanwhile, the unrealistic express lane, aiming to be a CEO, launching a disruptive startup, it looks intimidating.
The on-ramp looks terrifying.
But if you actually force yourself to merge onto it, there's barely anyone there. The road is wide open.
The barrier to entry for the express lane isn't necessarily a massive surplus of talent, you know? It is often simply the willingness to tolerate the discomfort of aiming high.
Tolerate the discomfort. That's a great way to phrase it.
Let's look at this through the lens of startup capital, which our sources highlight. It is a known phenomenon in venture capital that it is often significantly easier to raise $1 million for a startup than it is to raise $100,000.
Okay, I have to pause you right there, because my brain immediately rejects that premise.
Most people's do.
I mean, it sounds great on a motivational poster, but let's break down the actual mechanics. How on earth is asking someone for $1 million easier than asking for a fraction of that?
It seems counterintuitive.
Right, if I'm an investor, 100 grand is a much lower risk profile.
Well, you are assuming the investor profile remains static regardless of the ask, which is exactly where the math breaks down.
Okay, explain that.
If you are trying to raise $100,000, you are typically not talking to massive institutional funds. You are dealing with angel investors, friends, family, or individuals who are investing their personal savings.
Oh, I see. It's their own money.
Exactly. That money represents a significant emotional weight to them. Because their personal fear of loss is incredibly high, they're going to scrutinize every penny.
They'll want receipts for everything.
Yes. They will demand endless update meetings, micromanage your operational decisions, and essentially throttle your progress with their own anxiety.
Okay, I see where this is going. If I pitch $1 million idea, I'm out of the minor leagues.
Precisely. If you are raising $1 million, you are dealing with institutional investors, venture capital firms, ultra-high net worth individuals.
People who play a different game.
Right. To a fund managing $1 billion, a $1 million check is a standard, risk-adjusted allocation in a highly diversified portfolio. They expect a certain number of these investments to fail.
So they aren't losing sleep over it.
No, they don't have the time or the desire to micromanage you. They're looking for big ideas and big returns. Big asks attract sophisticated players who understand scale.
Well, small asks attract nervous players who will just, nickel and dime your ambition.
Aiming low actually introduces more friction into the system.
That makes a terrifying amount of sense. The scale of the goal changes the caliber of the people you interact with.
Exactly.
But let me push back from another angle.
Yeah.
Let's say I take this to heart. I bypass the realistic goals and aim for the absolute peak. Isn't aiming for the stars just setting yourself up for a massive, crushing failure?
How so?
Well, if I aim to build a billion-dollar company and fail, the psychological toll seems infinitely worse than aiming to open a nice, quiet corner bakery and maybe having it go under.
That argument relies on the assumption that failure is the only variable that changes. It ignores the variable of human energy.
Human energy, yeah.
Yeah, the source material introduces this biological and psychological concept called the adrenaline infusion.
Okay, the adrenaline infusion. What's that?
Whenever you set a goal, you are going to face obstacles. That is the only guarantee in business, right?
For sure.
If your goal is realistic and mediocre-like, getting that 3% raise at a job you merely tolerate, how much internal energy do you really possess to fight for it?
Probably not much.
Exactly. When the first hurdle appears, when your boss pushes back or the bureaucracy gets thick, you are highly likely to throw in the towel. The reward simply isn't worth the pain of the struggle.
The juice isn't worth the squeeze. Because the goal itself is uninspiring, it generates zero momentum.
But an unrealistic goal, a goal that borders on the impossible but deeply resonates with you, provides a massive, sustained adrenaline infusion.
It acts as an internal generator.
Yes. Whether it's taking a 6-month sabbatical to sail the Mediterranean or launching a product that completely disrupts an industry, the vision is so compelling that when you hit a wall, you don't quit.
You find a way over, under, or straight through that wall.
Unrealistic goals are fundamentally easier to achieve because they supply the intrinsic motivation required to overcome inevitable adversity.
So if we synthesize this first major concept, the takeaway is to stop negotiating your ambition down to what feels safe.
Right. You are actually making your life harder by aiming for the middle.
Don't overestimate the competition, and don't assume the realistic path is the path of least resistance.
Which brings us to a really critical juncture. We understand the mechanism of aiming high now, but we have to ensure the target itself is structurally sound.
And according to the text we are analyzing, society has conditioned us to aim at the entirely wrong metric.
Completely the wrong metric.
We are talking about the ultimate cliche here, the pursuit of happiness.
The American dream, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you poll 100 people on the street and ask them what their ultimate goal in life is, 99 of them will say, I just want to be happy.
Of course.
But the source material makes this bold, honestly somewhat controversial claim that happiness is a terrible, useless target.
It is entirely useless as a navigational tool because the word has been diluted to the point of ambiguity.
Diluted how?
Well, happiness can be achieved by just lowering your expectations to zero. You can achieve a fleeting state of happiness by sitting on the couch, ordering a pizza, and binge-watching television.
I mean, that sounds like a great Friday night.
Right. It satisfies a momentary craving, but it does not equate to a fulfilling, architected life.
To really understand why happiness is the wrong word, the text deconstructs it by looking for its true opposite.
This is fascinating.
It is. Because if you ask anyone what the opposite of happiness is, they'll immediately say sadness.
Which is a fundamental misunderstanding of human emotion.
Really? How so?
Think about love and hate. They are not opposites. They are two sides of the same coin of intense emotional engagement. The true opposite of love is indifference.
Right, just not caring at all.
Exactly. Similarly, happiness and sadness are deeply related physiological states.
We cry tears of joy, right?
Yes. We feel profound, bittersweet happiness during moments of grief, like remembering a lost loved one. The physiological responses, the elevated heart rate, the intense focus, they can be nearly identical.
So if sadness isn't the opposite of happiness, what is?
Therefore, the true opposite of happiness is not sadness. The true opposite of happiness is boredom.
Boredom. Just the complete absence of stimulation.
Yeah. The flat line.
Yes, the flat line. And if we accept that boredom's the true enemy, the opposite of the life we want, then the practical, actionable synonym for happiness is not contentment, it is excitement. Excitement. So asking, what do I want, is a bad question because it's too vague.
Way too vague.
And what are my goals?
Yeah.
Feels like a corporate performance review.
Right. Nobody gets fired up by that.
The only question that cuts through all the noise is, what would excite me?
Because excitement is the mechanical, biological state that pulls us forward. It provides that adrenaline infusion we just discussed.
This is a major light bulb moment for me. When people use all this fluffy new age language, follow your passion, find your bliss, discover your purpose, they're actually just dancing around a very raw, mechanical, biological state.
Exactly. They are talking about excitement, but wrapping it up in mysticism.
And failing to strip away that mysticism to clearly define what actually excites you leads to this highly dangerous psychological condition that the text terms adult-onset ADD, adventure deficit disorder.
Adventure deficit disorder. It's so prevalent.
I really want to dig deep into this because it introduces one of the most striking metaphors in the entire text. The cautionary tale of the fat man in the red BMW.
Oh, it is a vivid archetype, and it exists in every major city in the world.
Let's paint the picture.
So, the fat man in the red BMW represents the highly successful professional. He might be a corporate lawyer, an investment banker, or a serial entrepreneur.
Someone who society says has made it.
Right. He works relentlessly, sacrificing his youth and his relationships to amass wealth. His entire identity is tied to the accumulation of capital.
And he justifies it all by saying, I will retire when I hit this specific number in my portfolio.
Yes, the magic number.
But let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Isn't having a massive portfolio and a red BMW objectively better than being broke and bored?
Materially, sure.
I feel like a lot of people listening would happily take the millions and figure the rest out later. It's easy to critique the rich guy in the sports car, but money solves a lot of problems.
It solves logistical problems, yes, but it actively exacerbates existential ones if you haven't done the internal architecture.
What do you mean by internal architecture?
Let's look at the psychology of the vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum, and so does the human mind. This executive hits his magic number. He retires.
And then what?
Suddenly, the 60 to 80 hours a week he spent fighting corporate battles, analyzing markets, and feeling important, they are just gone.
Poof. Over.
If he has not precisely defined the exciting activities that will replace that work, he is left with a terrifying, yawning emptiness.
The void.
Exactly, the void. This is the existential dread of having everything you thought you wanted and realizing it didn't fix your internal operating system.
So the target number just keeps going up.
It has to, because the money was never the point. The pursuit of the money was the only thing distracting him from his lack of a life outside of work.
Wow.
He buys the red convertible to simulate excitement, a desperate attempt to feel something, but fundamentally he is running from terminal boredom.
It's like being on a treadmill.
Yeah.
You tell yourself you're running toward a destination, but you're actually just running to keep from falling off.
That's a perfect analogy.
If you don't define an off-ramp, a specific, exciting reality to step into, you just keep increasing the speed of the treadmill until your heart gives out. You work just to work, because the stress of the work is the only thing keeping the boredom at bay.
And this explains a phenomenon we see constantly. People staying in demanding, toxic jobs they claim to absolutely hate.
Why do they do it?
Because the familiar, structured pain of a bad job is actually preferable to the terrifying, unstructured emptiness of having nothing meaningful to do.
That is so counterintuitive, yet so devastatingly true. We cling to our stress because it gives us a false sense of purpose.
We do.
So the immediate action item for anyone listening isn't to, quit your job tomorrow.
Please don't do that.
Right. It's to stop asking, what are my goals? Take out a pen and ask yourself, what would excite me enough to wake up at 6 a.m. on a Saturday?
Yes. If you don't define that first, any success you achieve will eventually feel like a trap.
And once you do define that excitement, which, as we established earlier, will likely be something society deems unrealistic, you face a logistical problem.
It's a big one.
You're going to need resources, mentors, and networks that exist on that higher unrealistic level. You cannot achieve supernormal goals relying on a normal network.
Which brings us perfectly into the mechanics of networking up.
Right. How do normal people build supernormal networks?
Mm-hmm.
How do you actually get the attention of the people speeding by in the express lane?
It's a science, really.
The sources provide an absolute masterclass in this, detailing exactly how those Princeton students from the second year managed to contact luminary figures. There's this brilliant breakdown in an article by Adam Gottesfeld called Fail Better, which dissects the whole methodology.
The story of Ryan Marinin is the perfect case study to examine here.
Tell us about Ryan.
Well, Marinin was a self-described naturally shy kid from Los Angeles, not a Silver Spoon networker, just a regular college student.
Okay, relatable.
He decides to target two incredibly insulated individuals, Randy Komisar, a massively powerful venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, and Eric Schmidt, who at the time was the CEO of Google.
Okay, let's inject a dose of reality here. If I'm a college kid, or even a mid-level professional, the idea of cold emailing the CEO of Google is terrifying.
Most people wouldn't even consider it.
I would immediately assume my email gets trapped in a spam filter, or some executive assistant reads the first line, laughs, and deletes it. Aren't we just bothering busy people? Why would a billionaire CEO care about an unsolicited email from a nobody?
Well, you're right about one thing. They wouldn't care about a standard unsolicited email.
Right.
If Marinin had used a scattershot approach, blasting a generic resume and a request for a job to 100 CEOs, he would have been ignored entirely. That is what everyone else does.
So what did he do differently?
The methodology outlined in the text relies on highly specific, targeted psychology. The first step is purely tactical. You have to find a personal email address.
Not the info@google.com address.
Exactly. You do not email a generic info ad address, and you rarely use the public corporate email. You hunt through personal blogs, old interviews, domain registrations, or obscure forum posts to find a direct line that bypasses the gatekeepers entirely.
Okay, assuming you do the digital sleuthing and you actually find the private inbox, What he would say, "Hi, I'm a huge fan. Can you mentor me?" Or, "Hi, I need a job."
Absolutely not. Asking for mentorship or a job in a first contact is a massive violation of social capital.
So what's the blueprint?
It's very specific. You send a short email, maximum 2 to 3 paragraphs. It must immediately demonstrate genuine, nuanced familiarity with their specific work.
You prove you did your homework.
You prove in the first sentence that you have done deep research, and then you ask one single, simple-to-answer but thought-provoking question related to their life philosophy.
Just one question, not a list, not a meeting request.
One question. To give you the specific example, Marinin did not ask Randy Commissar for venture capital funding. He didn't ask for a startup critique.
What did he ask?
He referenced a specific, somewhat obscure article Commissar had written for the Harvard Business Review. He demonstrated that he understood the core premise, and then he asked a single philosophical question. When were you happiest in your life?
Oh, wow. That is brilliant. It completely bypasses the standard transactional relationship.
Right.
He isn't treating Commissar like a VC, he's treating him like a philosopher.
You have to consider the daily reality of these elite individuals. Highly successful people are bombarded every single waking hour with requests for money, requests for jobs, requests for introductions, requests for their time.
It must be exhausting.
They are surrounded by a sea of people who want to extract value from them. When you send a brief email asking a genuine, deeply human philosophical question, you are not acting as a parasite.
You're offering value.
Exactly. You are offering them a refreshing intellectual break from the overwhelming operational demands of their day.
You are giving them an opportunity to think about themselves in a way that doesn't involve quarterly earnings. And it worked, didn't it? Commissar actually replied.
He did. He replied with a thoughtful answer about his experiences with Tibetan Buddhism.
Tibetan Buddhism. Okay, that's deep.
And crucially, Marinin didn't immediately ruin the dynamic by saying, "Great, thanks, now will you look at my pitch deck?"
Which is what 99% of people would do.
Right. Instead, he maintained the intellectual exchange. He replied with a translation of a French poem by a Zen master that related to Commissar's point. He built a genuine, peer-level intellectual relationship over several exchanges before ever asking for a favor.
That takes incredible restraint.
Yeah.
But let's look at the other target, Eric Schmidt. Randy Commissar is a VC. He writes articles. He's somewhat public. Eric Schmidt was running one of the most powerful companies on earth.
A totally different beast.
I'm assuming Marinin couldn't just guess his Gmail address. Did he have to hire a private investigator or pay for some sketchy corporate database?
You would think so, but the reality is much more low-tech, though it required a borderline uncomfortable level of persistence.
Uncomfortable persistence. I like that.
He couldn't find the email online, but he knew a dean at Princeton who had a connection to Schmidt. So he emailed the dean asking for the introduction.
And the dean happily obliged.
The dean completely ignored him.
Right, of course, because deans have better things to do.
Most people would quit right there, assuming the silence was a hard rejection. Marinin emailed again. This time, the dean explicitly said no, citing privacy and protocol.
Strike two.
Again, 99% of people apologize and walk away, but Marinin pushed back a third time.
To a Princeton dean.
Yes, he acknowledged the protocol but asked a very specific question. Have you ever made an exception? Finally, wearing down the resistance, the dean caved and provided the contact information.
He literally brute forced his way through the bureaucracy.
Marinin explicitly credits this persistence to a maxim from the playwright Samuel Beckett, which actually became the title of the article. Ever tried, ever failed, no matter, try again, fail better.
Fail better. It's a great quote, but let's be honest about what that actually feels like in the moment. It requires putting yourself in a position to be repeatedly rejected.
It does.
It requires a tremendous amount of social discomfort. Sending that third email to a dean who has already told you no feels aggressive and awkward.
Which highlights a quote from the text that is arguably the thesis statement for this entire methodology. A person's success in life can usually be measured by the number of uncomfortable conversations he or she is willing to have.
I really want everyone listening to let that sink in. A person's success in life can usually be measured by the number of uncomfortable conversations he or she is willing to have.
It's profound. If you are avoiding sending the cold email because you fear rejection, if you are avoiding asking for the introduction because you don't want to seem pushy,
or avoiding the follow-up because the silence feels awkward.
Exactly. You are actively choosing comfort over success. The practical takeaway here is to systematically initiate uncomfortable conversations.
Send the cold email.
But architected intelligently, Make it about their work and their philosophy, offer intellectual value, and keep your immediate needs out of it.
Okay, so let's track our progress in this system reset. We've realized aiming high is mathematically easier.
Right.
We've redefined our target as excitement, dodging the trap of the fat man in the red BMW.
Escaping the void.
And we now have a blueprint for reaching out to the titans of any industry by embracing uncomfortable conversations and offering intellectual value.
We have the foundation.
But conceptually, this is still a bit abstract. If I get a billionaire on the phone tomorrow and they ask me what I actually want to build or do with my life, I'd probably freeze.
Most people would.
How do we translate this abstract excitement
Right.
into a concrete blueprint that doesn't require a trust fund?
This is where we transition from philosophy to hard mathematics. The text introduces a proprietary process called dreamlining.
Dreamlining, not goal setting.
Right. It is introduced as a radical alternative to traditional goal setting.
Because traditional goal setting is universally depressing.
It really is.
It's always framed as deprivation. Save 10% of your income in a mutual fund for 40 years, skip your daily coffee, and maybe you can afford to play golf in Florida when your knees are too bad to enjoy it.
Dreamlining entirely upends that model of deferred living. It operates on 4 distinct principles.
Okay, let's break them down.
First, it applies strict, aggressive timelines to dreams, usually 3 to 6 months, not 10 or 20 years.
3 to 6 months. That creates urgency.
Second, it shifts ambiguous desires into highly defined, actionable, measurable steps. Third, as we discussed with the adrenaline infusion, the dreams must be unrealistic.
The express lane.
And fourth, it focuses heavily on defining activities to fill the void so you don't fall victim to adventure deficit disorder.
Let's actually walk through this exercise. If you're listening, imagine doing this right now. The prerequisite mental leap is vital. You have to assume you are 10 times smarter than everyone else in the world.
And there's a magical guarantee that absolutely zero chance of failure exists.
What would you do? You create a 6-month timeline and list your dreams in 3 distinct categories: having, being, and doing.
Let's start with the having category. It is straightforward. It is the material acquisition, the house, the car, the specific gadgets, the wardrobe,
The stuff.
the stuff. But the key here is not to censor yourself with immediate financial anxiety. If you want a specific model of Aston Martin, write it down.
No guilt. If you want a personal chef or a beachfront villa in Tuscany, write it down. Put it on the paper.
Then you have the being category. This is about states of existence or skill acquisition, being fluent in a language, being an incredible cook, being a best-selling author, being a master negotiator.
But the text makes a very strict rule about the being category.
Yeah,
You can't just leave it as a state of being because the state is too vague to act on.
correct. Being must be immediately translated into an observable, measurable action.
Give me an example.
Being a great cook is a subjective concept. You cannot measure it. But you can measure making a complex Thanksgiving dinner for 6 people from scratch without any help.
Okay, that's concrete.
You cannot measure being fluent in Chinese. But you can measure having a continuous 5-minute conversation with a native speaker without using English. You have to convert the abstract identity into a concrete achievement.
And finally, we have the doing category. This is the direct cure for the fat man in the red BMW syndrome.
The excitement generator.
This is the excitement. Traveling the world, racing ostriches in South Africa, learning to fly a helicopter, whatever, gives you that adrenaline spike.
So you have this list. It looks incredibly expensive and totally impossible.
It usually does.
Now we get to the math of dreamlining, which, I'll be honest, completely blew my mind the first time I read it. We have to calculate 2 metrics: the target monthly income, or TMI, and the target daily income, TDI.
This calculation is where the most profound paradigm shift occurs. Most people look at a massive dream, let's say owning a high-end exotic car or traveling around the world, and they look at the total sticker price.
The lump sum.
Right. They think a Lamborghini Gallardo costs $260,000. I look at my bank account, and I do not have $260,000 in cash. Therefore, this dream is impossible.
But that is a fundamental misunderstanding of how capital and cash flow operate in the real world. The author points out that you do not need the lump sum.
You don't.
You only need to generate the capacity to cover the monthly cash flow.
It's the exact same logic as a mortgage, isn't it? You don't wait until you have $500,000 in cash under your mattress to buy a house.
No one does that.
You put down a fraction, and you ensure your income can cover the monthly carrying cost.
Exactly. But people rarely apply that logic to their ultimate lifestyle goals. When you shift your perspective from the terrifying total cost to the monthly cash flow requirement, the so-called millionaire lifestyle suddenly becomes mathematically highly accessible.
And the text provides highly specific, real-world examples to prove this.
Oh, the math is staggering.
That $260,000 Lamborghini, it can be leased or financed for roughly $2,897 a month.
An Aston Martin DB9, $2,003 a month.
A round-the-world trip with extended stops in Tokyo, Singapore, Bangkok, Delhi, London, and Frankfurt. The flights themselves cost just $1,399.
When you break it down like that, the illusion shatters. You don't need to be a millionaire to live like one. You just need to figure out how to generate a few thousand extra dollars a month.
But let me challenge this, because I can hear the skeptics screaming right now.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about the 2008 financial crash.
Ah, the leverage argument.
Yeah. The housing crisis was literally caused by people focusing only on the monthly payment and ignoring the total debt burden. If you lose your job, that $2,000 car lease suddenly ruins your life. Isn't this just reckless leverage?
That is a very astute objection, and it's exactly why the Dreamlining formula includes specific guardrails that the subprime mortgage market completely ignored.
What kind of guardrails?
First, we are talking about fixed 3 to 6 month timelines, not 30-year adjustable rate commitments. Second, and most importantly, the formula builds in a mandatory safety buffer. Let's walk through the actual calculation of the target monthly income to see how it protects you.
Okay, let's do the math live.
Right.
How do I calculate my TMI to fund this specific dreamline?
First, you take your monthly goals, the ongoing costs of the dreams, the car lease, the personal assistant's salary, your rent or mortgage, your food. You sum those up.
Easy enough.
Then you take your one-time goals like that round-the-world flight ticket or the cost of a helicopter training course. You divide the cost of those one-time goals by the number of months in your timeline.
So if I have a 6-month timeline, I divide the trip cost by 6 to get the monthly burden.
Yes. So you add up your monthly recurring dream costs and you add your amortized one-time dream costs.
Okay, got it.
Then you take your current baseline monthly living expenses, what it costs right now just to keep the lights on, pay your insurance, and feed yourself.
Just baseline survival.
You take that baseline and you multiply it by 1.3.
Okay, explain the 1.3. Why are we inflating our baseline?
The 1.3 multiplier provides an absolute non-negotiable 30% safety buffer.
Ah, I see.
This accounts for taxes, which everyone forgets, unexpected emergencies like a medical bill or a broken transmission, and baseline savings. You never, ever want to operate at exactly zero margin, which is the mistake made in the 2008 crisis.
So it's not reckless.
No, it's highly calculated. So you add your new Dreamline monthly costs to your 1.3 buffered baseline expenses. That final number is your target monthly income, your TMI.
So it's incredibly grounded. It's not just magical thinking. It factors in taxes and emergencies. And then the text takes it one step further.
The daily metric.
Yes, it suggests taking that TMI and dividing it by 30 to get your target daily income, your TDI. I love this part. But why is the daily number so much more effective than the monthly number?
It is a deliberate psychological trick to bypass cognitive overwhelm.
Cognitive overwhelm.
If you do the math and I tell you that you need to make $10,000 a month to live an absolutely incredible world-traveling, sports car driving dream life, your brain might freeze.
10 grand's a lot.
$10,000 feels like a massive, insurmountable mountain, especially if you are currently making, say, $4,000.
Right.
But if we divide that by 30, your target daily income is exactly $333 a day.
$333 a day. That feels entirely different. It feels like a puzzle I can actually solve.
And that feeling of it being a solvable puzzle is deeply rooted in neurology. It changes the way your reticular activating system filters information.
Okay, hold on. The reticular activating system. Break that down for me. What is that actually doing in my brain biologically? And what does it have to do with my daily income?
The reticular activating system, or RAS, is a bundle of nerves at our brainstem. Its primary evolutionary function is to filter out unnecessary information.
Filter it out.
At any given moment, you are bombarded by millions of bits of sensory data. The temperature of the room, the hum of the refrigerator, the feeling of your clothes against your skin.
If we processed all of it, we'd go crazy.
You would go mad. The RAS filters out 99% of it and only lets through what it deems important based on your current focus or survival needs.
It's the classic example of buying a red car and suddenly you see red cars everywhere on the highway.
Exactly.
They were always there, but your RAS was filtering them out as irrelevant until you told it that red cars matter.
Precisely. When your goal is a vague, make $10,000 a month, the RES doesn't have a specific enough parameter to filter for.
It's too abstract.
But when you mandate that you need exactly $333 a day, your brain stops looking at the insurmountable mountain and starts looking for loose change, so to speak.
It changes your perspective.
It starts filtering the world for highly specific, actionable opportunities. It starts prompting you with questions like, how can I sell 10 units of a $33 product today?
Or, how can I package my existing skills into a daily consulting service worth $330?
A daily dollar amount forces immediate, bite-sized ingenuity. Your brain goes to work on a granular level.
It makes the impossible instantly pragmatic. So the ultimate takeaway here is profound. Do not delay your life for an arbitrary lump sum of retirement cash that inflation is probably going to eat away anyway.
Calculate your exact target daily income to finance your specific dreams today.
But, and this is a massive but, knowing your TDI doesn't magically make the money appear in your bank account?
Unfortunately not.
A green line is just ink on paper without action. Which brings us to our final component, the first step and the comfort challenge.
This is where the theoretical rubber meets the practical road. The entire system reset is completely useless without the catalyst of immediate, uncomfortable action to build momentum.
The text calls this the steps now phase. Once you have your 4 main goals selected for your timeline, you have to define 3 steps for each one.
Right. 1 step for now, 1 for tomorrow, and 1 for the day after.
And there is a golden rule for that very first step, which seems almost draconian.
The golden rule is that you must take the first step now, not tonight after dinner, not after you sleep on it. You must take the action within 5 minutes of finishing the dreamlining exercise.
But practically speaking, what if I finish this exercise at 2 a.m.? Let's say my first step is to call a real estate agent about a beachfront rental in Tuscany. I can't call Italy in the middle of the night.
Then you ratchet the step down to match the reality of the moment, but you do not delay the action.
So what do I do?
You don't call them, but you write the email and schedule it to send at 8 a.m. Or you spend 5 minutes aggressively researching to find the specific agent's contact info and create the calendar invite to call them.
Okay, that makes sense.
The scale or magnitude of the action doesn't matter. The immediacy of the action is everything. The author explicitly warns that tomorrow becomes never.
Because if you let the momentum die, the old operating system just quietly reboots in the background. You wake up the next morning, the adrenaline is gone, and you fall back into comfortable inaction.
You convince yourself it was just a silly late-night fantasy.
It is entirely about breaking inertia. You have to prove to your brain that this isn't a theoretical exercise. It is a change in reality.
And speaking of breaking inertia and forcing reality, the source material introduces a final exercise that I'll admit made me genuinely viscerally sweat just reading it.
Oh, the comfort challenge.
Yes, the comfort challenge.
The underlying logic of the comfort challenge is profound. We established earlier that success correlates with the willingness to have uncomfortable conversations, right?
Right. To have an uncommon lifestyle, you need to develop the uncommon habit of making decisions and facing discomfort.
You cannot live an extraordinary, fearless life if you are paralyzed by ordinary, everyday social anxieties.
You have to train for discomfort just like a competitive athlete trains for a marathon.
Okay, so what is this specific training exercise? It's called learning to eye gaze. The instruction is this. For 2 full days, you must practice gazing into the eyes of others, people walking past you on the street, or people you are casually talking to, until they break contact.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just holding eye contact until they look away.
Now, the text does offer a few practical hints so you don't end up in a physical altercation.
The guardrails are very important here. Focus on one eye, blink occasionally so you don't look psychopathic.
Right, and if someone actually stops, gets defensive, and asks what on earth you are staring at, you have an out. You just smile pleasantly and say, "I'm sorry, I thought you were an old friend."
It's a perfect diffusion tactic.
But seriously, I can feel my chest tightening just thinking about staring a stranger down on a busy sidewalk. It violates every rule of urban etiquette. Why on earth are we doing this? It feels like we are just being provocative and weird for the sake of being weird.
It feels weird, and it causes your chest to tighten because you are intentionally violating an unspoken social contract. But triggering that exact physiological response is the entire point.
The goal isn't to be creepy.
No. The goal of this exercise is not the outcome. The goal is not to win a staring contest or to assert primate dominance over a stranger on the subway. The goal is the process of surviving acute, self-inflicted social discomfort.
It's essentially exposure therapy for your ambitions.
Precisely. Let's look at the neurology of fear. Society's rules, where to look, how close to stand, what is appropriate to say, are mostly self-imposed behavioral illusions.
Illusions.
They are guardrails designed by the collective to keep everyone comfortable and predictable. When you lock eyes with a stranger, your amygdala fires. Your body releases adrenaline and cortisol because it perceives a threat, the threat of social rejection or conflict.
Because it's abnormal behavior.
Right. But by actively pushing past the discomfort of sustained eye contact and holding your ground, you are demonstrating to your nervous system that violating a social norm will not physically harm you.
You don't spontaneously combust because a stranger thinks you're a bit weird. You survive the interaction.
Exactly. You are consciously building psychological muscle and neuroplasticity. Think of it as microdosing courage.
Microdosing courage. I love that.
If you cannot handle the minor manufactured discomfort of looking a barista in the eye for 3 seconds too long, how are you ever going to handle the major, authentic discomfort of quitting a secure corporate job?
We're launching a risky business.
Or looking an investor in the eye and asking for $1 million. You have to artificially expand your comfort zone in low-stakes environments so your nervous system is calibrated and ready when the high-stakes moments arrive.
So the practical dual takeaway here is this. Take action on your dream line within 5 minutes, no matter how ridiculously small the step has to be ratcheted down.
Right.
And then actively seek out minor social discomfort. Be the weirdo on the sidewalk, because that weirdo is actively training their brain for absolute freedom.
It is a deliberate, systematic untraining of your fear response. You are rewriting the code of your own behavioral limits.
Okay, let's pull all of this together and synthesize what we've unpacked today. We have covered a massive amount of ground, moving from high-level philosophy to the literal math of daily income.
It's been a journey.
If we look at the absolute soul of this chapter, the overarching insight is that society's default setting is fundamentally a broken operating system.
We are systematically taught to aim for realistic goals, which ironically traps us in the most fierce, gridlocked competition imaginable.
We are taught to hoard money for a distant, theoretical retirement, which leaves us terrified of the void and highly vulnerable to adventure deficit disorder.
And we are taught to avoid social discomfort at all costs, which keeps our network small, our lives predictable, and our ambitions muted.
But by initiating this system reset, we realize that those rules are entirely negotiable. Aiming for the impossible is actually mathematically and psychologically easier because of the adrenaline infusion.
Excitement, not a vague, diluted notion of happiness, is the true north we should be navigating by.
And that coveted millionaire lifestyle, the one everyone defers until they're 65 and exhausted, is actually just a simple matter of calculating your target daily income, bypassing the lump sum illusion, and having the courage to endure a few uncomfortable conversations to get the resources you need.
It completely flips the script on what it means to be successful.
You don't need $1 million sitting in a checking account. You need a few $100s a day in cash flow and the raw nerve to ask the world for exactly what you want.
That's the real currency. Nerve.
But here is a final provocative thought for you to chew on as we wrap up this deep dive. Let's assume you've done the homework. We have mathematically defined exactly what we want.
We've proved via dreamlining that it is actually much cheaper and more accessible than we ever thought possible.
But there's a glaring logistical problem we haven't solved. How on earth do we find the time to actually build this life, to generate this daily income, and to travel the world when most of us are still physically tethered to a cubicle from 9 to 5, 40 hours a week?
The time dilemma.
Exactly. So join us on the next deep dive, where we will completely obliterate the illusion of the standard corporate workday.
We are going to explore the mechanics of radical delegation and learn how it might be possible to accomplish a full week's worth of highly productive work in just 2 hours.
It will require an entirely new definition of productivity and an absolute ruthlessness with your time.
I can't wait to tear into that one.
Same here. But until then, remember our starting question. Don't ask yourself what is realistic. Look at the blueprint of your life. See where the fractures in your ambition are, and ask yourself, what would actually excite me?
And then, go outside, find a stranger, and make some incredibly awkward eye contact.
We'll see you next time.
What if, and I really want you to think about this, what if trying to manage your time is exactly what is wasting it?
Oh, that is such a radical thought.
Right. I mean, look at your calendar right this very second. We live in this culture that absolutely idolizes the daily grind.
Oh, completely. It's a badge of honor.
It really is. We reward people for being, frantically busy, like rushing breathlessly from one Zoom meeting to the next with zero white space on their schedule.
Yeah, the person who sleeps 4 hours a night is treated like some modern-day hero.
Exactly. But what if true productivity actually requires ruthlessly killing the entire concept of time management?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. What if the very act of trying to squeeze more into your day is the exact mechanism that's keeping you stuck, stressed, and ultimately ineffective?
Well, it's a total paradigm shift, and honestly, it's a very uncomfortable one for most high achievers to swallow.
Oh, I bet. It goes against everything we're taught.
It does, because we have been sold this persistent idea by the productivity industry that if we just find the right app or the perfect daily planner.
It's the ultimate time blocking system.
Right, exactly. Like if we just find that one trick, we can finally cram every single obligation into our 24 hours.
Which is just impossible.
It is. We treat time like a piece of luggage, and we're just trying to learn how to fold our shirts tighter to fit more in.
That's a great way to put it.
But the material we are looking at today argues that this is a fundamental trap. You don't need to do more things faster. You need to do drastically fewer things.
Okay, let's unpack this because that goes against, well, literally everything we are taught from the time we're in grade school.
It really does.
So the mission of our deep dive into the source material today is to explore why doing less is the ultimate shortcut to achieving more.
And it's so practical, too.
Extremely. We're going to look at why abandoning that traditional 9-to-5 mindset isn't just some, nice idea for digital nomads sipping coconuts on a beach.
Right. It's not just a fantasy.
No, it's absolutely essential for anyone interested in business, entrepreneurship, or, frankly, just reclaiming your sanity.
Yeah, just wanting your life back.
Exactly. So to start, to really understand this shift, we first have to dismantle this very specific, dangerous illusion we've all been sold by corporate culture.
Yes, and I would argue it's highly dangerous. It's the illusion of busyness as a proxy for importance.
The sources point this out so brilliantly, and I think anyone who has ever worked in an office has witnessed this firsthand.
Oh, without a doubt.
They describe how, in corporate America, if you run around the office carrying a cell phone and a stack of papers, looking visibly stressed out.
Checking your watch constantly.
Yes. You are automatically considered a, quote-unquote, good, busy employee.
You're a go-getter.
Right. You're on the move. You might even get a raise just for looking overwhelmed because management equates your visible stress with dedication to the company.
And what's fascinating here is that it is entirely about the performance of work rather than the production of actual results.
It's acting.
It is acting. The text introduces this critical concept to describe this behavior. They call it W4W.
Which stands for work for work's sake.
Exactly. Work for work's sake. It's this bizarre, almost universally accepted psychological phenomenon where we actively invent tasks just to fill time.
Just to look busy.
Yeah, because we feel this deep-seated, socially conditioned obligation to be visibly working.
Right, because if you're chained to a desk for 8 hours by your employer, you will inevitably invent 8 hours of things to do.
Even if only 2 of those hours involve tasks that actually matter to the bottom line.
It's like a survival mechanism, You don't want the boss to walk by and see you just staring at the ceiling, thinking.
Because thinking doesn't look like work.
No, typing furiously looks like work.
Right.
So you answer emails that don't need to be answered. You reorganize your digital files into perfectly color-coded folders.
Guilty. We've all done it.
We all have. And this brings up a massive distinction the material forces us to confront. It's the difference between effectiveness and efficiency.
Which is huge.
Because in everyday conversation, people use those words as synonyms, right? But mathematically and practically, they're absolutely not the same thing.
Not at all. And misunderstanding that difference is where most people lose literally years of their lives.
Wow, years.
Yeah. Because effectiveness is doing the things that actually get you closer to your goals. It is about direction.
Okay.
Efficiency is just performing a given task in the most economical, fastest manner possible.
Yeah.
It's just about speed, completely regardless of direction.
Okay, wait. Let me push back on this a little bit. on behalf of the listener.
Yep.
Because a lot of people pride themselves on efficiency.
Oh, I know. It's a huge buzzword.
Right. Like if I have this incredible, highly automated system that lets me process 100 completely unimportant emails in 10 minutes, society tells me I am being highly productive.
You're an email ninja.
Exactly. I cleared my inbox. I'm getting things done.
But are you?
Well, if those emails do nothing to advance my actual goals, it sounds like I am just running a 6-minute mile in the exact wrong direction.
That is a much more accurate way to look at it. You are sprinting in the wrong direction.
Like, I'm moving incredibly fast, but I'm getting further and further away from my actual destination.
Right. You are winning at a game that fundamentally does not matter. It's like, I love this analogy, it's like being incredibly efficient at rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic.
Yes. The chairs look amazing, perfectly aligned, but the ship is still sinking.
Exactly. If you apply a highly efficient system to a fundamentally useless task, you are just getting faster at wasting your life.
That is brutal.
It is, but it gives you this dopamine hit of accomplishment without any actual forward movement. You feel a sense of completion, your desk is clean.
But you haven't moved the needle on your core objectives 1 millimeter.
Not at all.
So why do we do it? Why is the entire corporate world utterly obsessed with efficiency rather than effectiveness?
Well, it raises an important question about how we manage people, right?
Yeah.
We default to efficiency because it is the default mode of the universe when it comes to measurement.
It's just easier to measure.
It's incredibly easy to measure. Effectiveness requires deep, uncomfortable analysis.
Ah, I see.
Like as a manager, I can look at a spreadsheet and see that you process 50 invoices an hour instead of 30. I can measure that output, I can put it on a performance review, and I can give you a bonus for it.
But measuring whether processing those particular invoices actually matters.
Exactly. Measuring whether that drives the core mission forward or if those clients are even worth keeping. That requires critical thinking.
It requires stepping back and questioning the premise of the work itself.
And frankly, most organizations heavily discourage questioning the premise.
Yeah, they really do. Just do your job. Right.
Right.
Well, the source text gives us 2 powerful truisms to combat this trap, and I think they are worth searing into your brain.
They are foundational.
The first one is, doing something unimportant well does not make it important.
Yeah.
And the second is, requiring a lot of time does not make a task important.
Those 2 rules alone destroy about 90% of traditional office work.
Honestly, yeah. Just because you spent 4 weeks perfecting a PowerPoint presentation for some mid-level marketing meeting, it doesn't mean the presentation was worth doing.
The time invested doesn't magically imbue the task with value.
Okay. So if efficiency isn't the ultimate goal, and being constantly busy is actually a trap that keeps us running in the wrong direction, how do we actually identify what is effective?
That's the core problem, right?
Yeah, because it's easy to say, just do what matters. But when you are in the thick of it, everything feels urgent. Everything feels like it matters.
Of course it does.
So how do we find the signal in the noise? The sources point us toward a massive realization made by a 100-year-old Italian economist.
Vilfredo Pareto.
Yes, Pareto, which provides this amazing mathematical framework for figuring this out. Tell us about him.
So Pareto was a somewhat controversial 19th century economist and sociologist, and he made this fascinating observation about the distribution of wealth in society, specifically in Italy at the time.
What did he find?
He was studying land ownership and wealth, and he found a stark, undeniable imbalance. He discovered that 80% of the wealth and land in Italy was owned by just 20% of the population.
The classic 80-20 rule.
Exactly. But he didn't just stop at macroeconomics. What makes this a universal law is that Pareto started noticing this exact mathematical imbalance everywhere he looked.
Everywhere.
Yeah. The famous anecdote is that he was literally just out in his garden and realized that 80% of his peas were produced by just 20% of the pea pods he had planted.
That is so wild. It's just a law of nature.
It is a recurring law of nature. And when we apply Pareto's law to modern business and personal productivity, the implications are just staggering.
Right, because the law states that 80% of your outputs result from 20% of your inputs.
Yes.
80% of your consequences flow from 20% of your causes. And critically, for anyone listening who is in business, 80% of your profits come from just 20% of your products and customers.
It is a mathematically predictable imbalance, and it completely shatters the fundamental concept of the work ethic we are all taught from childhood.
How so?
Well, we are taught a linear model of effort. If you put in 1 unit of work, you get 1 unit of result.
Right. Put in 10 hours, get 10 units of output.
Exactly. But Pareto proves that this is a total fallacy. The reality is highly skewed.
Like incredibly lopsided.
Very lopsided. Perhaps 2 hours of your work are generating 8 units of results, and the remaining 8 hours of your work are generating a pathetic 2 units of results.
Which means those 8 hours are practically useless.
They are filler. They are W4W.
To really ground this in reality, the sources share this incredible and I think painfully relatable personal anecdote from the author.
Oh, this story is a perfect example.
Right. So at one point in his career, he was running a sports supplement company, and he was the classic hustle culture entrepreneur.
Working 15-hour days, 7 days a week.
Yes. Answering emails at midnight, tracking lost packages, dealing with unhappy customers. He was on the absolute brink of total physical and mental burnout.
He was just shoveling coal into the furnace of this business because he didn't know what else to do.
He thought that's what being a CEO meant, right? You just bleed for the company.
Exact.
But finally, out of sheer desperation and exhaustion, he sat down and decided to run a Pareto analysis on his own life and business.
And he asked himself 2 very specific, very important questions.
The first one was, which 20% of sources are causing 80% of my problems and unhappiness?
Crucial question.
And conversely, the second one was, which 20% of sources are resulting in 80% of my desired outcomes and happiness?
And when he actually ran the numbers, the analysis of his business revealed things that were staggering. But they were perfectly in line with Pareto's law.
Walk us through those numbers because they are insane.
Let's look at the positive side first. The desired outcomes, the revenue. Out of more than 120 wholesale customers he was serving at the time.
Okay, 120 customers.
He discovered that a mere 5 of them were bringing in 95% of his revenue.
Wait. 5 out of 120.
5. 5 customers out of 120 were driving almost the entire business.
That is less than 5% of his customer base.
Exactly. Meanwhile, he realized he was spending 98% of his time, his energy, and his stress chasing and servicing the other 115 customers who barely moved the needle financially.
Oh my God.
And then, when he looked at the negative side, the problems and the unhappiness, he found that just 2 large customers were causing nearly all of his problems.
Just 2.
Just 2. They were the ones demanding special treatment, constantly complaining, returning products, and consuming all of his customer service time.
Okay, hold on. I have to stop you right there and push back on this, because I can hear every small business owner listening right now literally screaming at their speakers.
I know, it's terrifying.
The math makes sense on paper. I get it. But the action the author took based on this analysis is terrifying. He completely stopped contacting 95% of his customers.
He did.
He literally fired the toxic 2% who were causing the headaches, and he focused solely on the top 3%.
He stripped it all the way down.
But if I'm running a business, firing 95% of my paying clients sounds like absolute entrepreneurial suicide. I mean, every dollar counts, right?
That's the standard thinking, yes.
So how does someone actually do that without going bankrupt or, frankly, just having a nervous breakdown? The friction to actually executing this must be massive.
You are hitting on the exact psychological barrier that keeps most people trapped in that W4W cycle. It feels like suicide because it violates every instinct of conventional wisdom.
Right. Conventional wisdom says more customers equals more money.
You never, ever turn away a paying client. You fight for every scrap of market share.
Exactly.
But what Pareto proves, and what the author discovered firsthand, is that some customers actually cost you money. The friction to firing them is purely emotional.
Okay, wait. Cost you money how? If they are paying for a product, they are generating revenue. It might be small, but it's revenue.
It's because of the invisible costs, the cost to serve. Think about it. If a client buys $100 worth of product, but they require 5 hours of your customer service, time, phone calls, custom emails, and they cause you immense stress,
then you're losing money.
You are operating at a massive loss on that client. You are basically paying them in your time and sanity to take your product.
That makes total sense when you put it like that.
The author realized that those 115 clients were a parasite on his time. They were actively preventing him from finding more of the top 5 clients who actually drove the real revenue.
So how did he actually do it? What was the mechanical process of firing them?
He put them on passive mode. He sent them an email establishing strict new rules. He instituted minimum order quantities. He cut off all customized phone support and made everything go through a standardized web form.
So he just built a wall.
Exactly. He basically said, here is how we operate now. If this doesn't work for you, We understand and wish you the best.
Wow. And the toxic ones?
The toxic clients, the ones causing all the actual problems, he outright fired them.
Just told them to go away?
He told them he could no longer meet their needs and politely suggested they find another vendor. It is an incredibly bold, almost arrogant-feeling move.
But the results speak for themselves. I mean, by cutting that fat, by getting rid of the clients who were draining his time without providing proportional revenue, his income didn't drop.
Oh, it skyrocketed.
The text notes that his income went from $30,000 a month to $60,000 a month in just 4 weeks.
He doubled his monthly revenue.
He doubled it. But the real kicker, the absolute craziest part, is the time. His weekly hours dropped from 80 hours down to 15.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is the ultimate proof of effectiveness over efficiency.
Because he wasn't just trying to handle the bad clients faster.
Right. He wasn't trying to find a more efficient way to answer the complaints of the toxic customers. He eliminated the toxic customers entirely. He stopped running the wrong way.
And by doing so, he freed up 65 hours a week.
Which is life-changing. Some of those hours went to resting and recovering from his burnout. And a few of those hours went to replicating the profile of his top 5 customers to find more just like them.
Which is why the revenue doubled.
Exactly.
Doubling the income while cutting work hours by over 80%. I mean, honestly, it sounds like a late-night infomercial, but it's just ruthless mathematical application.
It's just the math.
However, we really shouldn't gloss over how emotionally difficult that kind of fat-cutting analysis actually is for the ego.
It was agonizing.
The truth hurts. Firing paying clients or admitting to yourself that 90% of what you do all day at your desk is totally worthless requires a massive ego check.
You have to admit that you've been fooling yourself. You have to confront the reality that you have been busy, but you have not been useful.
Ouch.
It hurts. The discomfort of firing a client or dropping a massive project you have spent 3 months on just because you realize it's part of the useless 80% that is acute pain.
But the alternative?
The alternative is chronic pain. The slow, grinding exhaustion of working yourself into the ground for marginal returns over decades.
So what does this all mean for the listener who isn't an entrepreneur, the person who is, sitting in traffic right now, commuting to a standard job, thinking, look, I don't own a business, I don't have wholesale clients to fire, my boss tells me what to do.
Right. How does this apply to them?
Yeah, how does Pareto apply to personal life or a traditional career?
Pareto's law is universal. It applies to absolutely everything, including your social circle, your daily activities, your habits, your investments.
So you run the same numbers on your life?
You have to run this exact same 80-20 analysis on your own personal life. You ask yourself, who are the 20% of people in your life causing 80% of your stress, your trauma, your self-doubt?
Oh, wow.
And conversely, what are the 20% of activities or hobbies that give you 80% of your actual joy, relaxation, and fulfillment?
That is a brutal mirror to look into, because you might realize that one specific friend group is the source of almost all your anxiety, and you are spending 80% of your social energy trying to appease them.
Precisely. And you can fire toxic friends or draining social obligations just as effectively as you can fire bad clients.
You just stop investing time in that bottom 80%.
You decline the invitations. You stop initiating contact. The goal across the board in business and in life is the ruthless elimination of the unessential, so you can multiply the impact, the joy, and the depth of what remains.
Okay, so Pareto's law gives us the scalpel. It helps us cut away the useless 80%. But here is the lingering question, the puzzle piece that still doesn't quite fit for me. Let's say a listener does this perfectly. They eliminate all the fluff, they set boundaries, they fire the bad clients, and they only have the super important 20% of tasks left on their plate. The truly effective stuff.
Okay, they've isolated the gold.
Why does it still feel like it takes all damn day to get those few important things done? Why do we still end up sitting at our desks until 5:00 p.m. staring at a screen?
This brings us to a major structural flaw in how we organize society. And it raises a really important question about the design of our workdays. We are brushing up against the concept of the 9-to-5 illusion.
Okay.
And a psychological mechanism known as Parkinson's law.
The sources go incredibly hard on the 9-to-5 workday, and I absolutely love this part. They call it a socially agreed-upon illusion, a dinosaur legacy from the Industrial Revolution.
It really is a dinosaur.
Let's provide some context here for you listening. The 8-hour workday wasn't, handed down on stone tablets. It was championed by labor unions and people like Henry Ford back when the majority of people worked on factory assembly lines.
Right, doing physical labor.
Yeah, in a factory, if you are tightening bolts on a Model T, your output is directly linearly tied to your time. 8 hours of bolt tightening produces exactly twice as many cars as 4 hours of bolt tightening.
It is a pure results by volume approach.
But for modern knowledge workers, people sitting at computers typing, there is absolutely no biological, psychological, or practical reason why everyone on Earth needs exactly 8 hours to complete their unique daily cognitive tasks. It is totally arbitrary.
It is entirely arbitrary. And yet it is enforced with a religious fervor in the corporate world.
It is the golden rule of adulthood.
And because we are trapped in that arbitrary 8-hour box, whether we need it or not, our brains fall victim to Parkinson's law.
Tell us about Parkinson's law.
So this law was articulated by C. Northcote Parkinson in the 1950s, and it dictates that a task will swell in perceived importance and complexity in relation to the time allotted for its completion.
So simply put, work expands to fill the time available for its completion.
Exactly. If you give a person 8 hours to do a 2-hour task, it will miraculously take 8 hours.
Because the human brain abhors a vacuum of time.
Yes. If you know you have to be at your desk until 5:00 p.m., regardless of when you actually finish your work, your brain will unconsciously stretch the workout to ensure you don't finish until 4:59 p.m.
That is so true. You will read the same email 3 times.
You will format the spreadsheet with 5 different colors.
You will go down some massive internet rabbit hole researching a minor detail.
The task balloons in complexity purely because the time is available.
The text gives this great, highly relatable example of a college class the author took at Princeton with a professor named Ed Shao.
Oh, the paper story.
Yes. The final paper for this class was worth a massive 25% of the overall grade, so the stakes were incredibly high.
Very high stakes.
The author had chosen to write this in-depth, complex analysis of a specific startup company. He had been planning it for weeks, but at the absolute last minute, due to confidentiality issues right before an initial public offering, the startup pulled out.
Oh, no.
They legally wouldn't let him use any of the data. He couldn't use a single shred of his prior research. And he had exactly 24 hours until the final paper was due.
Panic is the natural, visceral response there. Most students would beg for an extension, claim unfair circumstances, or just give up.
But his professor looked at him and simply reminded him that entrepreneurs make things happen. No excuses.
Brutal, but effective.
Right. So, fueled by sheer adrenaline, caffeine, and the absolute terror of an imminent deadline, the author went to the library, researched an entirely new company from scratch, and wrote a complete 30-page analytical paper in 24 hours.
And he got an A.
And he got an A. Here's where it gets really interesting. How is that mechanically possible? How can a 30-page analytical paper, written in a blind panic over 24 hours, be just as good, or frankly better, than one written slowly and methodically over 2 whole months?
It defies our normal understanding of quality and effort, right?
It totally does.
But it comes down to the mechanics of extreme focus and the forced elimination of trivialities.
Okay, break that down.
When you have a massive amount of time, say 2 whole months to write a paper, you have the luxury of deliberation. And deliberation is very often just procrastination dressed up as thought.
Wow, procrastination dressed up as thought.
You second-guess your thesis. You read 20 articles that are only tangentially related. You obsess over the font choice, the margins, the perfect opening sentence.
The task morphs into this intimidating mental monster that causes anxiety every time you think about it.
Exactly. But when you only have 24 hours, the extreme time pressure acts as a blowtorch.
It just burns away all the fluff.
It strips away every single ounce of fat. You have 0 time to procrastinate, 0 time to second guess, and 0 time to overcomplicate. You are forced to execute only the bare, critical essentials of the assignment.
I love this concept. It's exactly like packing for a vacation.
Oh, that's a perfect analogy.
Seriously, think about it. If you tell me I am going to Hawaii in a week, and you give me 7 days to pack, I am filling 3 giant suitcases.
Naturally.
I'm putting in just-in-case sweaters for a tropical island. I'm packing 5 pairs of shoes. I'm packing snorkeling gear that I don't even know how to use. I will spend hours obsessing over outfit combinations.
Because you have the time to overthink it.
Right. But if you knock on my door, tell me the taxi is honking outside, and I have exactly 10 minutes to pack before I miss my flight.
You panic, but you execute.
I run to the bedroom, grab my wallet, my passport, a phone charger, 2 swimsuits, and clean underwear. I throw it in a duffel bag and run out the door. And you know what? It turns out that's all I actually needed to have a fantastic trip anyway.
The extra 6 days of packing time didn't improve the trip.
It just added useless weight to my luggage.
That is a brilliant analogy, and it perfectly encapsulates the mechanism. You intuitively apply Parkinson's law when you are forced by massive external constraints.
The 10-minute taxi constraint forced me to instantly identify the essential 20% of items.
The items that would provide 80% of the value on the trip. What the source material suggests is that we shouldn't wait for emergencies to trigger this focus. We have to artificially manufacture those severe constraints in our daily lives.
So it's a two-pronged attack.
Precisely. You must use Pareto's law to strictly limit your tasks only to the important, deciding what goes in the suitcase.
Okay.
And then you must use Parkinson's law to aggressively shorten the work time allotted to force hyperfocus.
Setting the 10-minute timer.
Yes. There are 2 synergistic approaches that are inversions of each other. Pareto limits tasks to shorten work time. Parkinson shortens work time to limit tasks to the important.
So if you apply one without the other.
You either have a short day filled with useless tasks or a long day filled with important tasks done very slowly. You need both.
Okay, this is all sounding incredibly powerful in theory. Eliminate the fluff, set insanely short deadlines, become hyper-focused. But for you listening right now, we need to bridge the gap to reality.
We need application.
Exactly. How do we practically execute this? How do we apply these laws to our daily routines tomorrow morning without our entire professional world falling apart? Because my boss isn't going to care about Vilfredo Pareto if I miss a deadline.
Theory without application is useless. So the sources provide a fantastic detailed case study here to show exactly how this works in the real world.
Introduce us to Charney.
Right. They introduce us to a man named Charney. Charney was a highly successful tech salesman, but he was caught in the classic trap. He was working 40 hours a week. He was married. He had a 2-year-old at home. His wife was pregnant with another baby.
So he is maxed out.
Completely maxed out. He desperately wanted and needed to increase his income to support his growing family, but he had no time. He physically and mentally couldn't squeeze another hour of hustle out of his week.
He had hit the ceiling of the linear time for money model.
Exactly. So the author didn't give Charney a complex new CRM software or a time-blocking journal.
No, he gave him one rule.
He gave Charney just one single simple task. He had to set an alarm on his computer or phone to go off at least 3 times a day.
And when it went off?
When it went off, he had to stop whatever he was doing and ask himself one specific diagnostic question. Am I being productive or just active?
Or, to phrase it even more aggressively, which I love, am I inventing things to do to avoid the important?
It is a phenomenal diagnostic tool because it pierces through the delusion of W4W. Often, our busyness is just a subconscious avoidance tactic.
We don't want to make the hard, intimidating cold call to a big prospect.
We don't want to write the difficult, high-stakes proposal.
So what do? We clean our desk. We reorganize our computer desktop into perfectly labeled folders. We reply to 20 low-priority emails from colleagues that could have waited until Friday.
It feels like work. It looks like work to anyone walking by. But it's really procrastination dressed up as productivity.
By setting that alarm, Charney was forcing himself into mindfulness. He caught himself in the act of W4W over and over again.
An alarm would go off, he'd realize he was just shuffling papers, and he'd force himself to pick up the phone and make the hard sales call.
And we need to look at the mechanics of what actually happened when he did that, because the results are wild.
Oh, they're incredible.
By catching those avoidance habits and ruthlessly cutting them, Charney dropped his actual work hours from 40 down to 18 per week.
He stopped the useless internal meetings. He stopped the endless email threads.
He only focused on high-leverage sales activities.
And because he was applying Parkinson's law to those 18 hours, meaning he knew he had to get it all done in a compressed time frame, his focus was laser-like.
And he ended up taking every single Monday and Friday entirely off to be with his family.
And despite working 22 fewer hours a week, he ended up producing 4 times the sales results.
I want the listener to let that sink in. From 40 hours to 18 while quadrupling his output and income.
It proves that the vast majority of his previous 40 hours were actively hindering his sales.
To help you achieve results like Charney's, the source material doesn't just leave it at setting an alarm. It provides several highly actionable and frankly psychologically intense thought exercises to force this shift in perspective.
Yes, let's walk the listener through a few of these frameworks because they are incredibly powerful if you actually do them.
Let's do it. The first one is what they call the heart attack test. I love the visceral nature of this.
It's intense.
It forces extreme prioritization by asking you a hypothetical. If you had a severe heart attack today and your doctor strictly limited you to working only 2 hours a day maximum, or else you would literally die, what exactly would you do in those 2 hours?
It's a brilliant thought experiment because it immediately strips away all the vanity metrics and the office politics.
Right, because if your life is on the line and you only have 2 hours, you aren't spending 45 minutes on a committee meeting to decide the color of a font for an internal newsletter.
You aren't arguing in the Slack channel about who left the microwave dirty.
No. You are logging on and doing the 1 or 2 critical things that actually generate revenue or drive the core mission forward, and then you are logging off.
But then the text takes it a step further, just in case 2 hours a day still leaves you room to mess around.
Yeah, what if you had a second heart attack and the doctor said you are now limited to working only 2 hours a week?
At 2 hours a week, the paradigm entirely breaks.
Yeah.
You realize you can no longer be the one executing the tasks.
You have to completely remove yourself as the bottleneck of your own life or business.
Exactly. In those 2 hours, you can only make high-level decisions. You have to delegate, automate, or outright eliminate practically everything else.
It is a terrifying exercise to sit down and actually write out how your job would function if you were only there for 2 hours a week. But it highlights just how much of your daily activity is pure filler.
Another framework they offer is the gun-to-the-head test.
Also intense.
Also very intense. If you were literally forced at gunpoint to stop doing 4/5, 80% of your time-consuming activities.
All the emails, the endless phone calls, the check-in meetings, the status reports.
If you had to drop 80% of them tomorrow, what would you remove to keep the negative effect on your income to an absolute minimum?
What is the stuff that, if you just stopped doing it, nobody would actually notice or care?
All of these tests are about artificially manufacturing forced constraints, which leads us to the daily tactical level. How do you actually manage your tasks once you've cut the fat?
One of the most effective, counterintuitive, practical hacks from the material is the folded paper rule.
I love this one.
This one is so simple, but so good. Think about your current to-do list. We all have those endless digital to-do lists, right? On your phone, in Asana, in Notion.
Because they're digital, they are infinite.
Right. You can put 300 items on there, you can color code them, and looking at a list of 300 things causes immense baseline anxiety.
It's paralyzing.
The rule the author gives is to ditch the digital list entirely for your daily execution. Instead, use a standard piece of physical paper and fold it in half 3 times.
The physical limitation is the entire point. By folding a standard sheet of paper 3 times, you are left with a tiny rectangle of space to write on.
You physically cannot fit 20 tasks on it, even if you write really small.
The rule strictly states you should never put more than 2 mission-critical items on this piece of paper per day. Never.
But wait, people will say, I have 10 urgent things to do today, my hair's on fire.
If you have 10 things that seem urgent, you have to force rank them. The folded paper rule forces you to make hard decisions before you start working.
If you have 10 things, you have to choose the 2 that matter most.
And to help you force rank them, the text provides a crucial filter, the end-of-day satisfaction question.
Yes. You look at your tiny folded piece of paper with those 2 tasks on it, and you ask yourself, if this is the absolutely only thing I accomplished today, will I be satisfied with my day?
If the answer is no, then you have the wrong tasks on the paper.
You've written down busy work instead of needle movers.
What all these frameworks, the heart attack test, the folded paper, the satisfaction question, what they're really combating is task creep and the grand modern delusion of multitasking.
Oh, multitasking.
The text makes a pointed effort to emphasize that multitasking is a complete biological myth. The human brain cannot focus on 2 complex cognitive tasks simultaneously. It is impossible.
You aren't multitasking, you are just task switching very rapidly and doing a terrible job at both.
Exactly. Divided attention just leads to more frequent interruptions, lapses in concentration, a higher error rate, and ultimately poorer net results.
Doing 2 things at once means doing both of them poorly and taking longer to finish them.
The discipline required here is that you must take your 2 mission-critical items on your folded paper and execute them sequentially. You do the first one from start to finish with zero distractions, no email, no phone. Then you do the second one.
Now, earlier we talked about how this applies whether you are a business owner or an employee. But the sources highlight a huge, massive caveat here regarding how you actually execute this, depending on your employment status.
This is critical.
We need to spend some time on this because it is where the rubber meets the road. If you work for a company, if you have a boss sitting down the hall from you, you have to tread incredibly carefully with these laws.
Yes. The overall framework for this entire philosophy of lifestyle design is built around an acronym, DEAL.
Which stands for definition, elimination, automation, and liberation.
Right. For an entrepreneur, you define what you want, you eliminate the 80% fat, you automate what's left, and you are liberated.
But the text explicitly, urgently states that for traditional employees, the order must be DELA. You must achieve liberation before elimination. Let me explain the logic here because it is painfully clear to anyone who has ever survived a corporate environment. Let's walk through a hypothetical scenario.
Lay it out.
Let's say you are sitting in a cubicle, totally visible to your boss and your coworkers. You listen to this deep dive, you get inspired, and you start applying Pareto's Law and Parkinson's Law tomorrow morning.
Okay, you're fired up.
You stop going to useless meetings, you use the folded paper rule, you hyper-focus, and you become 4 times more productive. You literally finish a 40-hour week's worth of work by Tuesday afternoon. You are crushing it.
Beautiful.
What is your boss going to do when they see you sitting there on Wednesday morning reading a book or browsing the internet? Are they going to say, wow, you are so efficient, take the rest of the week off with full pay?
Absolutely not. They're going to reward your extreme efficiency with more work. They will look at you, realize you have spare capacity, and they will hand you the delayed projects of your slower, less efficient colleagues.
You will be punished for your effectiveness with a massive influx of busy work.
You will end up working 40 hours a week again, but producing the output of 4 people for the exact same salary. It is a trap.
It is the ultimate corporate trap, so how do you avoid it?
That is why an employee must first use their newly found covert hyperproductivity to negotiate a remote work agreement. That is the liberation phase.
You don't tell your boss you finished everything on Tuesday?
No, you hold on to the work and deliver it on the normal schedule, proving you are incredibly reliable. You use that flawless track record as leverage to say, I focus better at home. Let's try 1 day a week remote. Then 2 days.
You have to get out of the physical office environment where physical presence is falsely equated with productivity.
It's a survival tactic for the corporate jungle. You have to break the visual link between your body in a chair and the work being done.
Only once you are working remotely, away from the watchful panopticon eye of middle management, can you safely apply the elimination phase.
Because if you are at home and you finish your week's work by Tuesday afternoon, you just don't tell anyone.
You keep your phone near you, you respond to emails so people think you are working, but you have just reclaimed Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday for your own life without being penalized for it.
It requires an immense amount of self-reflection, discipline, and strategic thinking to pull off. W4W is a cozy blanket. Doing what everyone else does is safe. Stepping outside of that requires you to constantly police your own actions.
I want to ask you, the listener, to really think about your own crutch activities right now, the things you use as a cozy blanket.
What are the things you do specifically to feel productive while avoiding this scary, important work?
Be honest with yourself. Are you literally checking your email right now or reorganizing your desk or scrolling LinkedIn just to avoid making that hard phone call or having that tough conversation with a client or finally starting that creative project you've been putting off?
It is deeply uncomfortable to admit those things to ourselves, but that brutal self-awareness is the very first non-negotiable step toward reclaiming your time. You can't fix a leak if you refuse to look at the pipe.
So what does this all mean? Let's tie all of these threads together. We've talked about W4W, Pareto, Parkinson, Charney, and the DLA framework.
It's a lot of ground.
It is, but if there is one core beating truth at the heart of this entire chapter, it is the realization that lack of time is actually lack of priorities.
That is the perfect summary.
If you are feeling overwhelmed, if you are drowning in tasks and working weekends, it isn't because you have too much to do. It is because you haven't decided what not to do.
Precisely. That is the synthesis of everything we've discussed. True productivity has absolutely nothing to do with accumulating more hours at the office, or waking up at 4 a.m. to hustle, or finding a clever new software trick to do your useless busy work 10% faster.
True productivity is about the ruthless, unapologetic elimination of the unessential.
As the text suggests, being busy is very often just a form of lazy thinking and indiscriminate action.
Intellectually lazy.
Yes, it is intellectually lazy to just do everything that lands on your desk. It is much easier to do 100 things poorly, let the current of other people's demands sweep you away, than it is to sit down, think deeply, say no to 99 things, and do the one hard thing that actually matters.
Lack of time is lack of priorities. I love that. It shifts the blame from the clock to our own choices.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the entire goal of this methodology, embracing selective ignorance, cutting the fat with Pareto's law, forcing extreme constraints with Parkinson's law, and escaping the physical office, is not just to win back some leisure time so you can watch more television.
No, it's so much bigger than that.
It is to win back your fundamental freedom, the freedom to direct your own energy. It is about creating the lifestyle of what the author calls the new rich, where time and mobility are recognized as your most valuable, non-renewable currencies, rather than just chasing a higher salary while chained to a desk.
Which brings us to a final, slightly terrifying thought for you to mull over as you go about the rest of your day.
Let's hear it.
Let's say you take this deep dive to heart. Let's say you apply all of this perfectly. Tomorrow, you successfully eliminate 80% of your busy work. You fire the bad clients, you stop going to the useless meetings, you use your folded piece of paper, you are highly effective, you hit all your targets, and suddenly it's 11:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, and you are completely done for the day.
The dream.
But is it? Your inbox is handled, your major tasks are finished. What are you going to do with the terrifying, beautiful vacuum of free time that is left behind?
Oh, that's a hard question.
Because if you don't have a compelling answer to that question, if you don't have passions, hobbies, or a life outside of work, you will panic. And you will just fill that vacuum right back up with W4W to feel important again.
That is the ultimate existential challenge of true time management. It forces you to figure out who you are when you aren't working.
Exactly. You have to build a life worth having time for. Now that you've reclaimed your clock, it's time to protect your brain. Because next time on the deep dive, we are taking this concept of elimination to the extreme.
Oh, cutting the cord.
We are cutting the cord, shutting out the noise, and going on a strict, ruthless, low-information diet. We are going to explore why consuming the news might be the ultimate form of W4W. You won't want to miss it.
What you just listened was the beginning of a full audio, way longer, explaining every single chapter of the book. If you would like to keep listening to the end and access to the full audio, you can access it with the link down below in the description and in the pinned comment.